The man I promised to spend my life with sold my car for $18,000 in cash while I was sitting in a quarterly budget meeting. He did not tell me. He did not ask. He simply transferred the title to a stranger and handed the cash to his 24-year-old mistress so she could upgrade her lifestyle. He texted me at exactly 4:12 in the afternoon. The message read, "I sold the sedan. You take the bus now. She needs it more." He thought I would break down in the middle of a downtown Orlando parking lot. He thought I was just a predictable wife who would quietly accept the humiliation to keep the peace. What he did not know was that I am a logistics analyst. My entire career is built on tracking failures in supply chains and holding people accountable for missing assets. My name is Renee, and I am 34 years old. Today, I sat in the back of a rideshare vehicle watching the Florida sun set and began drafting the audit of my marriage. If you have ever had a partner mistake your patience for weakness, drop your age in the comments below. Welcome to Emily Told Stories. Hit the like button and make sure to subscribe because you are going to want to hear exactly how I dismantled his entire life. The faux leather seat of the rideshare gripped the back of my knees. The air conditioning labored against the late afternoon heat, baking the tinted windows. The driver had a local talk radio station playing low in the background, a steady hum of traffic reports and weather updates that grounded the surreal nature of the afternoon. My phone vibrated against my palm, the metal casing already warm from the ambient temperature. An unknown local number flashed across the screen. I tapped the green icon and brought the device to my ear. A man spoke. His voice was thick with mounting panic and a sharp edge of frustration. "Ma'am, are you Renee Henderson?" "Speaking," I replied. My tone remained perfectly flat. "I am Brian. I run an auto brokerage off Orange Avenue. Look, I am staring at the title to the dark slate sedan your husband just sold me for 18 grand in cash. I went to process the paperwork, and the state registry flagged the transfer. I need to know why this document is still exclusively in your name." 4 hours earlier, the sliding glass doors of my corporate logistics firm had parted, offering me to the unforgiving heat of the city. The air in Central Florida does not just warm you, it sits heavy on your chest like a wet wool blanket. I had spent the previous 3 hours in a windowless boardroom, projecting quarterly profit margins and identifying operational redundancies. I was tired, my mind still sorting through pivot tables and expense reports. I walked toward the reserved employee parking lot, shifting my leather tote bag higher on my shoulder while reaching for my keys. Spot 42. It was completely bare. A patch of dry, sun-baked asphalt sat where my car had been parked since 8 o'clock this morning. I stopped walking. My initial thought did not jump to theft. It jumped to towing. A property management error, an expired tag. I reached for my phone to check my email for any building security alerts. A single text message from Jason waited on the lock screen. "I sold the sedan. You take the bus now. She needs it more." I read the words. Then I read them a second time. A standard reaction involves a dropped bag, a sharp gasp, a frantic phone call demanding answers. I did not dial his number. Screaming provides the opposition with a blueprint of your emotional state. In logistics, when a supply chain breaks, you do not weep over the missing cargo. You track the failure point. You gather the data. I pressed the side buttons on my phone and took a screenshot. Data captured. Timestamp secured. I lowered the phone to my side. The pavement radiated heat through the thin soles of my work pumps. Right near the toe of my right shoe, a palmetto bug lay crushed against the concrete. It was flattened into the gray stone. It had crawled into a space expecting to survive, oblivious to the heavy tread coming down from above. I stared at the insect for a long moment. Jason thought I was the bug. He thought he could just step on my property, erase my daily commute, and walk away clean. He assumed his arrogance would paralyze me. I did not feel heartbreak. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. My car was purchased 3 years before our wedding. I held the title free and clear. Florida is a strict title state. You cannot sell a vehicle without the registered owner providing a wet signature or a legally binding release. Jason had not just insulted me. He had stepped across a very rigid legal line. I opened a transit app, typed in my home address, and waited in the shade of a sable palm tree for a driver to accept the fare. I spent the 10-minute wait mentally cataloging every document locked in my home office. The rideshare hit a pothole on Interstate 4, jostling me back to the present moment. Brian was still on the line. I could hear his heavy breathing through the receiver, the sound of paper shuffling in the background. He was waiting for an explanation that would magically protect his money. He expected a confused wife. He expected tears and apologies. "Mr. Henderson told me you signed off on this," Brian added. His voice grew tighter, climbing half an octave. "He said you were just too busy at the corporate office to bring the car down yourself. He had a signed power of attorney. He had the keys." I looked out the window at the blurred, sun-drenched sprawl of the city. Jason's strategy relied entirely on my compliance. He assumed shame or shock would keep me quiet. He believed I would retreat to the shadows to lick my wounds while his mistress drove my vehicle. He was half right. I would remain quiet, but not out of shock. "Brian," I said. I stripped my voice of any inflection or warmth. "I did not authorize that sale." A beat of heavy silence passed through the receiver. The talk radio in my car murmured about a backup on the expressway. "What do you mean you did not authorize it? I have a signed title right here in my hand. The ink is fresh." "You have a piece of paper," I corrected him. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Take clear, well-lit photographs of the bill of sale, the title document, and this power of attorney you mentioned, front and back. Email them to me immediately." Ma'am, I gave him cash. $18,000. If this is a marital dispute, I am not getting in the middle of it. I run a legitimate business. I will call the police and let them sort out whoever is lying. This is not a marital dispute. This is fraud. I am the sole legal owner of that vehicle, and my signature was forged. If you want to recover your $18,000, you are going to need my cooperation to prove he deceived you. Send me the documents, Brian. We have work to do. I lowered the phone and ended the call without waiting for his agreement. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide, taking in the cold reality of the conversation he had just overheard. He quickly looked back at the road, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. I opened a new folder in my secure cloud drive and titled it simply Audit. The shock was over. The paperwork had just begun. The rideshare vehicle glided onto the interstate, merging into the thick flow of evening commuters heading west toward the suburbs. I reached into my leather tote and retrieved my work tablet. The screen illuminated the dim back seat, casting a pale blue glow across my hands. I did not text my husband. I did not call my mother to cry about my marriage falling apart. I connected the tablet to my cellular hotspot and waited. 2 minutes later, an email notification slid across the top of the glass. The sender was listed as Brian from Orange Avenue Auto Brokers. The subject line was blank. There were 3 high-resolution attachments. I tapped the first icon. A scanned copy of a standard Florida vehicle bill of sale filled the screen. My eyes scanned the lines of text, noting the vehicle identification number, the exact mileage, and the sale price of $18,000. At the bottom of the page, sitting on the line designated for the seller, was my name, Renee Henderson. I stared at the ink. The signature was a clumsy imitation. My capital letter always loops back on itself with a fluid motion born from years of signing logistics manifests. The character on this document was rigid and hesitant. It was drawn by a hand trying too hard to copy a shape rather than write a name. It was insulting. If someone intends to steal a significant asset, they should at least practice the forgery. I swiped to the second document. This was the missing puzzle piece. Florida operates on an electronic title system for most modern vehicles. When a car is paid off, the state holds the title digitally to prevent paper fraud. To sell a vehicle for cash to a third-party broker without the registered owner present in the room, you need a physical loophole. You need to manufacture legal consent. Jason had generated a limited power of attorney. The document explicitly granted my husband the right to negotiate the sale, transfer the title, and collect funds on my behalf. I magnified the image, focusing on the bottom right corner of the page. A power of attorney requires a licensed notary to witness a signature and apply a state-issued seal. There it was. A circular blue stamp pressed firmly onto the paper, validating the fraudulent signature above it. I dragged 2 fingers across the screen, zooming in until the pixels of the blue ink blurred. I read the text curved around the edge of the circular seal. State of Florida Notary Public. In the center sat the name of the commissioning entity, Strategic Growth Solutions, LLC. A sharp breath escaped my lips. Strategic Growth Solutions was Jason's company. He had left a stable management position at a commercial real estate firm 2 years ago to launch an independent consulting venture. He called it Bridge Capital. He promised the business would secure our future. Instead, it became a financial sinkhole, draining our joint savings to maintain the appearance of success. The notary stamp belonged to his sole employee. She was an office manager he had hired a few months prior. The pieces of the timeline clicked together with devastating precision. 1 week ago, I had walked into Jason's home office to retrieve a charging cable. The room was his sanctuary, decorated with heavy mahogany furniture and leather chairs meant to project authority. I remembered looking down at his desk. I am a person who notices spatial arrangements. I notice when inventory shifts. Jason usually kept a wooden tray on his desk containing his expensive pens, business cards, and that specific self-inking blue notary stamp. That afternoon, the stamp was missing. When Jason walked into the room and saw me standing near his desk, he had physically stepped between me and the wooden tray. He asked what I was looking for with a tight, forced smile. I thought he was hiding an unpaid bill. He was not hiding a bill. He was preparing to steal my car. The conflict was no longer a domestic dispute. It was no longer a story about a cheating husband taking a vehicle to impress a younger woman. By using a corporate seal to falsify a legal document transferring a state-registered asset, Jason had crossed a strict legal boundary. He committed identity theft. He committed wire fraud by taking electronic payment from the broker. He implicated his own business in a multi-party felony. I sat back against the fabric seat of the car. The sheer audacity of his foolishness was almost difficult to process. He did not just forge my name. He weaponized his own failing company to do it. I swiped to the third attachment. It was a copy of the broker receipt. Brian had issued a certified check and a small portion in cash totaling $18,000. The receipt had a handwritten note at the bottom. Vehicle delivery pending by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Seller retained keys overnight to remove personal property. The mechanics of the scam laid themselves bare. Jason drove the car to Brian's lot today. He presented the forged power of attorney and the fake bill of sale. He collected the cash advance to secure the deal. Then he played the part of the sentimental husband. He asked Brian if he could drive the car home one last time to clear out his wife's belongings, promising to drop the vehicle off first thing in the morning. Brian, wanting the inventory, agreed to the delay. Jason never intended to give Brian the car. He needed the $18,000 in untraceable liquidity to fund his double life. He executed a sham sale to launder the asset for cash. Meanwhile, he took the physical vehicle and handed the keys to his mistress. He told me to take the bus so Ashley could drive a dark slate sedan. He thought he could outrun the paperwork. He thought I would be too embarrassed to contest the sale and that Brian would eventually just write off the loss or pursue a civil claim that Jason would ignore. He built a house of cards on the assumption that I would never open the front door. I did not call Jason to scream. I did not send him a message threatening to expose him. Anger is a fleeting emotion that often forces you to show your hand before you are ready to play it. Instead, I opened the cloud storage application on my tablet. I created a new encrypted folder. I titled it Asset Recovery. I saved the forged bill of sale. I saved the fraudulent power of attorney. I saved the broker receipt. I renamed each file with a clear, accurate description and the exact date. I needed more than just the fraudulent paperwork. A forged document proves a crime occurred, but it does not tell you where the asset is right now. Jason handed the keys to Ashley. I needed to know exactly where Ashley was taking my property. I needed a geographic footprint. The rideshare driver exited the interstate, navigating the quieter streets of the suburbs. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a bruised purple sky. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. Jason thought he had orchestrated a brilliant maneuver. He thought he had solved his financial crisis and rewarded his mistress in one swift stroke. My eyes shifted to the small rectangular sticker affixed to the inside of the rideshare windshield. It was an electronic toll transponder used for the express lanes across the state. A cold smile ghosted across my lips. Every vehicle registered in Central Florida utilizes the electronic toll system. My dark slate sedan was equipped with a transponder linked directly to my personal email and my personal credit card. Jason never paid the tolls, so he never checked the account. I unlocked my phone and opened the browser. I had the forged documents securing the felony. Now I needed the digital trail securing the affair. The map of his destruction was about to be fully drawn. The rideshare vehicle pulled into the circular driveway of our Windermere home. The house stood perfectly manicured against the fading twilight sky. It featured a pristine stucco exterior and a Spanish tile roof projecting an image of suburban success. It was a flawless facade that masked the decay growing behind the front door. I thanked the driver, stepped onto the paved walkway, and unlocked the deadbolt. The central air conditioning wrapped around me as I entered the foyer, chilling the damp heat on my skin. The silence inside the house was thick and heavy. It was the kind of quiet that usually brought comfort after a long day of corporate negotiations. Tonight, it felt like a staging ground for a quiet war. I did not go to the master bedroom to change out of my work clothes. I walked straight down the hallway to my home office and powered on my desktop monitor. I needed a geographic footprint. Jason had driven my car to the auto broker today, but someone else had been driving it for the past several weeks. A vehicle does not just vanish into the ether. It leaves a trail. I opened a web browser and navigated to the Florida Department of Transportation portal. I typed in my credentials for the electronic toll collection system. The interface loaded on the screen displaying the current balance and a long list of recent transactions. In logistics, raw data is useless until you organize it. I clicked the button to export the entire history into a spreadsheet format. I opened the file and began filtering the columns by date, time, and plaza location. I highlighted the entries tied specifically to the transponder affixed to my dark slate sedan. A clear, undeniable rhythm emerged from the chaos of the numbers. For the last 6 months, my vehicle had passed through the Interstate 4 express lane tolls heading northeast during the late afternoon. The trips occurred every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. The exit timestamps placed the car consistently near a specific cluster of high-end residential developments in Winter Park. The pattern was rigid. Jason told me he played golf or attended networking mixers on those specific evenings. He claimed he took rides with clients to discuss commercial real estate trends. Instead, he had been taking my car, tossing the keys to a younger woman and letting her navigate the affluent streets north of downtown Orlando. My chest did not tighten with grief. I felt only the familiar, steady rhythm of problem-solving taking over my mind. I color-coded the toll entries, matching them against a downloaded copy of Jason's shared digital calendar. The fake networking events aligned perfectly with the toll charges. His lies were now officially documented in blue and yellow cells on my screen. Toll records only provided a radius. They did not provide an exact apartment number or a name. For that detailed information, I needed access to his digital ecosystem. I needed his silver work laptop. Jason is a man who operates entirely on ego. If I confronted him with anger, he would become defensive and lock down his devices. He expected me to be highly emotional. He expected a weeping wife begging for answers about her missing vehicle. The most effective way to disarm an opponent is to give them exactly what they expect to see. I opened a new browser tab and searched for local marriage counseling services. I found a highly rated psychological clinic offering intensive weekend couples mediation retreats. The website featured soft pastel colors and imagery of smiling partners holding hands on a white sand beach. It was the perfect bait. I sent the brochure to my wireless printer. The machine whirred to life, spitting out 3 pages of glossy emotional vulnerability. I took the warm paper and walked into the kitchen. I placed the documents directly in the center of our marble island, right next to the fruit bowl. The placement was deliberate, positioned so he could not possibly miss it upon entering the room. Then I poured myself a glass of iced water and waited in the fading light. The heavy oak front door opened 30 minutes later. Jason stepped into the foyer. His posture was stiff. His jaw was clenched tight. He was bracing for a loud argument. He placed his leather briefcase on the entryway table and carried his silver work laptop into the living room, setting it down on the sofa cushion. He walked toward the kitchen, preparing his opening defense for selling my vehicle. His eyes landed on the printed pages resting on the marble island. I watched his gaze sweep over the large, bold words advertising a couples mediation retreat. The physical transformation was immediate and almost comical. The tension drained from his shoulders. His jaw softened. A faint, arrogant smirk touched the corner of his mouth. He thought I was broken. He believed the theft of my car had pushed me into a state of desperate submission. He assumed I was willing to ignore the missing asset if it meant saving our fractured union. He looked at me standing near the sink. I kept my expression neutral, adopting the subtle look of a defeated spouse. He exhaled a long breath and unbuttoned his suit jacket. He told me he was going to take a quick shower to wash off the stress of the day. He said we would sit down and talk about everything when he came back downstairs. His tone was condescending, dripping with false sympathy. He turned and walked up the staircase. The moment I heard the bathroom door click shut and the water pipes engage, I moved. I walked into the living room and flipped open the silver laptop on the sofa. Jason had been so relieved by my manufactured despair that he had not bothered to log out or close his applications. The screen woke up instantly. I did not search his messages or social media accounts. Cheaters often use encrypted applications for casual communication. Financial documents, however, require standard software. I opened his local file explorer and typed a single word into the search bar. Lease. The system generated a list of recent files. I scrolled past the commercial agreements related to his failing consulting business. There it was. A portable document format file named Winter Park Residential Agreement. I double-clicked the icon. A standard Florida residential lease loaded on the screen. The property address matched the exact affluent neighborhood pinpointed by my toll road audit. The monthly rent was staggering. It was an amount his struggling business could not sustain. I scrolled down to the signature page. There were 2 names printed at the bottom. The financial guarantor was Jason. The primary occupant was listed as Ashley Miller. I finally had a name. I finally had an address. I pulled out my mobile phone and took clear, high-resolution photographs of every single page. I made sure to capture the signatures, the contact information, and the listed rental amounts. I did not forward the document via his email client. Sending a file creates a digital trace in the outbox that he could discover later. Photographs are invisible to the device owner. I closed the lease document. I returned the mouse cursor to the exact pixel where he had left it on the screen. I gently lowered the laptop lid back into its resting position. I walked back to the kitchen and stood near the island just as the shower water stopped running upstairs. Jason was dressing in comfortable clothes, preparing to come downstairs and play the role of the benevolent husband managing a hysterical wife. He believed he was stepping into a negotiation where he held all the leverage. He thought he was outsmarting a woman who only cared about keeping a ring on her finger. He was oblivious to the fact that he was cohabitating with a forensic auditor who had just mapped the entire architecture of his betrayal. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the hardwood stairs. He was coming down for dinner. I reached into a drawer and pulled out a sharp culinary knife. I placed a bell pepper on the cutting board. It was time to serve him silence. The sharp edge of my culinary knife sliced through the crisp flesh of a red bell pepper. The rhythmic sound of steel hitting the wooden cutting board echoed against the marble countertops. It was a precise, measured noise. Chop, slide, chop. I stood at the kitchen island, maintaining a steady pace. I did not look up when the heavy footsteps moved across the hardwood floor of the living room and stopped at the edge of the kitchen. Jason stood in the doorway. He had changed into a pair of expensive tailored lounge pants and a fitted dark cotton shirt. His hair was slightly damp from the shower, smelling faintly of cedar and peppermint body wash. His posture was a masterclass in rehearsed arrogance. He leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at me, then his gaze drifted to the mediation retreat brochure still resting near the fruit bowl. A subtle, satisfied smirk touched his features. He truly believed he possessed the upper hand. He thought he was walking into a room to console a broken woman. I continued dicing the vegetables. I kept my eyes focused downward on the blade. He cleared his throat, adopting a tone that sounded remarkably like a corporate manager addressing a subordinate. Look, Renee, I know you are upset about the car. I understand it was a shock. But you need to look at the bigger picture here. My consulting firm is on the verge of landing a massive commercial portfolio. I needed bridge capital immediately to secure the operational costs. The bank was moving too slow. I had to liquidate an available asset to keep the business afloat. He paused, waiting for a reaction. I gave him nothing. I rotated the bell pepper and made another clean slice. We are partners, he continued. His voice took on a patronizing edge of false patience. Sometimes partners have to make sacrifices for the future of the family. I did not want to sell your vehicle, but the market does not wait. You can take the transit lines for a few weeks. It is temporary. Once this deal closes, I will buy you a brand new luxury sports utility vehicle. You just need to trust my financial strategy. His words washed over me like static noise. He was talking about bridge capital and market timing. He was entirely ignoring the second half of his own text message from earlier that afternoon. He did not mention the word she. He did not mention his mistress. He was offering a sanitized corporate excuse to cover up a deeply personal theft. As he continued to outline his fabricated business hurdles, my mind drifted away from the kitchen. A memory surfaced with startling clarity. It was our wedding day, 5 years ago. The reception took place at a sprawling country club overlooking a manicured golf course. I wore a heavy silk gown. Jason wore a custom tuxedo. Late in the evening, after the formal toasts concluded and the guests migrated to the dance floor, I stepped outside onto the stone patio to escape the noise. I stood in the shadows near a large stone pillar, holding a glass of sparkling water. Jason was standing a few feet away, smoking cigars with 3 of his groomsmen. They could not see me. One of his college friends slapped him on the shoulder, laughing loudly. He asked Jason how he managed to lock down someone so successful and put together. He asked if I ever lost my temper. Jason exhaled a thick cloud of cigar smoke and chuckled. His voice carried clearly through the cool night air. "Renee is great," he told them, "but she is basically a human spreadsheet. 0 drama, 0 unpredictability. If you give her a logical parameter, she just follows it. It is the easiest relationship in the world because she never lets her emotions get in the way of efficiency. She is manageable." I had stood behind that stone pillar holding my glass, absorbing the assessment. He mistook my emotional control for a lack of passion. He equated my analytical nature with weakness. He thought being manageable meant I would simply accept whatever parameters he chose to set. He married me because he believed I would never be volatile enough to challenge his authority. That fatal miscalculation brought us to this exact moment. I finished chopping the last piece of the vegetable. I scraped the pieces into a glass bowl. Then I slowly, deliberately, set the knife down on the wooden board. The sudden cessation of the chopping noise left a ringing silence in the room. I turned my body to face him. I wiped my hands on a cloth towel. I did not scream. I did not hurl the glass bowl at his head. I looked directly into his eyes. His confident posture faltered for a fraction of a second. He was bracing for tears. He was ready to defend himself against accusations of infidelity. "Where is the physical receipt of the transaction?" I asked. My voice was entirely flat, devoid of any measurable emotion. Jason blinked. The question derailed his prepared script. What he asked, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "I did not ask you about your consulting firm," I replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact. "I did not ask about your bridge capital. You sold a state-registered asset today. A commercial auto broker does not hand over $18,000 in cash without generating a multi-carbon receipt and a preliminary bill of sale. I want the physical paperwork. Hand it to me." He shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. The patronizing smirk vanished, replaced by a sudden flare of nervous energy. He was deeply unnerved by the lack of weeping. He did not know how to fight an opponent who refused to engage in a screaming match. "The paperwork is processing," he stammered. His vocal pitch climbed slightly. "The broker is handling the title transfer with the Department of Motor Vehicles. I do not have the hard copies yet. They are going to mail the final disclosures to the house next week." It was a clumsy lie. An auto broker provides immediate documentation to the seller. I knew this. He knew I knew this. But he was trapped in a corner of his own design. I stared at him. I let the silence stretch out, counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. The quiet became an oppressive physical weight in the room. I was weaponizing the absence of sound. People who rely on manipulation despise silence because it forces them to confront the emptiness of their own lies. Jason could not handle the quiet. He broke eye contact, looking down at the floor. "You are being unreasonable," he muttered, trying to summon a defensive anger to cover his retreat. I am trying to build a future for us, and you are interrogating me like a hostile witness. If you cannot be a supportive team player right now, then I am not going to stand here and argue with you. I am not arguing, I stated simply. I am going to sleep in the guest room tonight, he announced. His voice was louder now, attempting to reclaim a sense of dominance. I think we both need some space to cool down. We can talk about the mediation retreat tomorrow when you are ready to be rational. He turned sharply and marched down the hallway. I listened to his heavy footsteps retreat. A few seconds later, the thick wooden door of the guest bedroom slammed shut. The latch clicked into place. He thought his alpha male performance had worked. He thought walking away gave him the victory. He believed he had successfully secured the cash, appeased his mistress, and suppressed his wife all in a single afternoon. I remained standing perfectly still in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed a low, steady note. I reached into my pocket and retrieved my mobile phone. I navigated to the secure cloud folder to verify the uploaded files from Brian the auto broker were still intact. They were untouched. Then the screen illuminated with a sudden bright notification. The device vibrated sharply against my palm. It was an automated alert from the Neighborhood Security Gate application. Our affluent community utilized a digital logging system that tracked every vehicle entering the premises. Residents could register specific license plates to their accounts for automatic gate access. I had registered my dark slate sedan 3 years ago. I opened the application. A live captured photograph appeared on my screen accompanied by a timestamp. 8:14 in the evening. The image showed the front grille and license plate of my stolen vehicle idling in the visitor lane of the community entrance. The bright glare of the security floodlights illuminated the driver sitting behind the wheel. It was a young woman with long blonde hair. Ashley. Jason had told her the car was hers. He had filled her head with lies about his impending divorce and his massive wealth. He made her feel so untouchable, so entitled to my life, that she had decided to drive the stolen asset directly to my residential address. She was not hiding. She was seeking a confrontation. She wanted to stake a physical claim on my territory. I looked at the notification. My pulse did not race. A deep, profound sense of calm settled over my shoulders. Jason thought he had separated his two worlds. He thought the evidence of his crime was safely tucked away in Winter Park. He was wrong. His mistress had just bypassed the perimeter and brought the felony directly to my front door. I locked the screen of my phone. I untied my apron and laid it neatly across the marble island. I walked out of the kitchen and headed toward the front porch. The real audit was about to begin. I unlocked the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the thick, humid night air. The latch clicked shut behind me, sealing the quiet interior of the house away from the impending collision on the front lawn. The halogen street lamps cast long, pale shadows across the manicured grass. The rhythmic hum of cicadas vibrated through the trees, creating a steady baseline of noise. A pair of bright halogen headlights swept around the curve of the cul-de-sac, piercing the darkness. The dark slate sedan coasted to a halt right at the edge of my driveway, blocking the path to the garage. The engine continued to idle. A young woman pushed the driver's side door open and stepped out onto the pavement. She wore a silk camisole and designer denim. The outfit was selected specifically for a dramatic theatrical entrance. She slammed the heavy car door shut, allowing the metallic thud to echo through the quiet suburban neighborhood. She stood near the hood, crossing her arms over her chest and shifting her weight to one hip. She was waiting for the stereotypical betrayed spouse to run out of the house weeping and shouting. She had built a narrative in her mind based on cheap television tropes. She wanted a performance. She needed the validation of a screaming match to prove that she had won a prize worth stealing. I raised my mobile device. I opened the high-definition camera application and pressed the red recording button. I walked down the brick pathway leading to the driveway. My steps were even and unhurried. Ashley opened her mouth, a practiced sneer forming on her lips. "Are you Renee?" she asked, loudly, projecting her voice so the neighbors might hear. "Jason told me you were refusing to let go. He said you were holding on to a dead marriage and making things difficult for everyone." I did not look at her face. I kept the camera lens focused squarely on the rear bumper of the vehicle. Florida license plate, Juliet Romeo 472 Alpha. I stated aloud, ensuring the microphone captured my voice with perfect clarity. Recorded at 8:21 in the evening on residential property. "Excuse me, are you deaf?" Ashley demanded, taking a step forward. "I am talking to you. He gave me this car. He loves me. You need to pack your things and accept reality." I ignored her words. I stepped around her, moving to the base of the windshield. I leaned over the hood, pointing the camera at the small metal identification plate embedded near the dashboard glass. "Vehicle identification number verified," I noted for the recording, matching the state registration documents filed exclusively under my legal name. I finally stood upright and pointed the camera directly at Ashley. She looked confused. The rehearsed script was dying in her throat because her scene partner was refusing to read the assigned lines. "You are trespassing with stolen property," I informed her. My tone carried zero malice. It was not a warning. It was a simple legal classification. Panic flared in her wide eyes. This was not the chaotic emotional scene she had prepared for. She was facing a cold, clinical audit, and she lacked the vocabulary to navigate it. She spun toward the house and raised her voice to a frantic pitch. "Jason! Jason, get out here right now! Your crazy wife is recording me!" The front door jerked open. Jason stumbled out onto the porch. He had thrown a dark cotton shirt over his expensive lounge pants. His face drained of all color the moment the security floodlights illuminated the dark slate sedan parked on our driveway. This was the exact moment his two distinct realities suffered a catastrophic collision. He had spent the entire afternoon constructing a fragile web of deceit requiring isolation to survive. He told Brian, the commercial broker, the car was secure in a lot. He told me the paperwork was processing through municipal channels. He told Ashley the asset was a gift paid for by his endless wealth. Now the stolen vehicle was idling on my property. His mistress was screaming on the lawn. His wife was holding a high-definition lens, capturing every single legal violation in real time. "What are you doing here?" Jason hissed, jogging down the brick pathway. He did not look at me. He grabbed Ashley by the elbow, trying to physically pull her toward the open driver's side door. "You cannot be here. You need to leave right now." "You said the car was yours to give," she argued, pulling her arm away from his grasp. "She just said it was stolen. Why is she recording us? What is going on, Jason?" Jason reached into his pocket for the keys. His hands were shaking. The polished, confident consultant who had smirked at me in the kitchen 20 minutes ago was gone. His nervous system was flooded with adrenaline he did not know how to process. He fumbled the plastic key fob. It slipped through his sweating fingers and clattered onto the concrete driveway. He scrambled to pick it up, dropping to his knees. The rough pavement scraped against his skin. It was a pathetic display of lost control. The curated image of wealth and dominance shattered into tiny, irrecoverable pieces on the ground. He looked small and desperate. "Get in the car," Jason ordered, his voice cracking under the strain. He hit the unlock button. "I will explain everything later. Just drive away from here." I maintained my steady grip on the phone, keeping both of them centered in the recording frame. "Jason," I said evenly. He froze. His hand rested on the door handle. He finally turned his head and looked at me. Sweat beaded on his forehead, reflecting the harsh glare of the streetlights. He was terrified of what I might say next. "Smile for the audit," I added. He shoved Ashley into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. He took a step back, raising his hands as if surrendering to an unseen force. The sedan reversed out of the driveway with a loud screech of rubber tires leaving dark marks on the concrete. The vehicle sped down the street and disappeared into the humid night. Jason stood alone on the lawn, breathing heavily. He stared at the empty space where his grand illusion had just collapsed. He turned and walked past me, keeping his head down. He retreated into the house without uttering a single syllable, locking the door behind him. I stopped the video recording. I uploaded the large media file directly to the secure cloud folder designated for asset recovery. I attached a viewing link to a new email drafted to a senior partner at a prominent family law firm located downtown. I typed a brief summary of the evening's events and hit send. The physical evidence was now legally protected and distributed beyond his reach. As I turned to walk back toward the porch, my phone vibrated with a sudden priority alert. It was not a standard text message. It was a secure notification from the primary banking institution that managed our joint savings account. I opened the alert. The text displayed on the glowing screen was precise and devastating. Notice of action. An unauthorized withdrawal attempt of $18,000 has been initiated via electronic transfer. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds available to complete the request. The strategy revealed itself instantly. Jason was trapped. Brian, the auto broker, was undoubtedly demanding his cash back after our phone call exposed the fraudulent title. Jason had already spent a portion of those funds today, paying for Ashley to secure her luxury Winter Park apartment. Facing a massive deficit and an angry commercial broker threatening police involvement, Jason was desperately trying to drain our joint savings to cover his tracks. He thought he could steal from my bank account to cover the theft of my car. He was treating our shared finances as a personal bailout fund. He assumed the money would flow without restriction. He was about to learn the true definition of a financial freeze. I slid the phone into my pocket and walked inside the house. Tomorrow morning, I would execute a strike that would paralyze his entire operation. The morning sun crested over the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the Windermere neighborhood. The house was entirely silent. Jason had left early, presumably to deal with the fallout of the previous night. I did not log into my corporate network. For the first time in 7 years, I bypassed my logistics dashboard. I opened my email client and drafted a brief absence notification to my department director. Personal administrative emergency. It was the truth. When a supply chain is contaminated, you halt production immediately to isolate the defect. My marriage was deeply contaminated. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, buttoning a tailored charcoal blazer. I chose my wardrobe carefully today. You do not walk into a financial institution wearing casual clothing if you intend to dismantle a man's fiscal mobility. You dress like a liability auditor. You project authority so the bureaucracy bends to your timeline. I drove my rental vehicle to the primary branch of our joint banking institution, located in downtown Orlando. The lobby was intensely air-conditioned, smelling faintly of industrial floor wax and stale coffee. The atmosphere was hushed, filled with people conducting mundane morning transactions. I approached the teller station and requested to open a new checking account solely under my name and social security number. The process required 14 minutes of signatures and identity verification. Once the independent account was active, I handed the teller a withdrawal slip for the joint savings ledger. I did not drain the account. Vengeance relies on greed, but justice relies on math. I divided the total balance by 2, down to the exact decimal point. I transferred 50% of the liquid assets into my private ledger. I left Jason his legal marital share. I simply ensured he could not use my half of the capital to fund his felony or appease his mistress. The teller processed the transfer, handing me the crisp paper receipts. I did not leave the building. I requested an immediate audience with the branch fraud department manager. A man in his late 50s wearing a muted gray suit ushered me into a glass-walled office. He introduced himself as Marcus. I sat in the leather guest chair and unzipped my portfolio. I did not tell a sob story about a broken marriage. Bureaucrats do not respond to tears. They respond to documented risk. I spoke the language of corporate liability. I laid the documents flat on his mahogany desk. The forged power of attorney, the fake commercial bill of sale, the time-stamped screenshots of the illicit withdrawal attempts from the previous evening. Finally, I provided a preliminary police report number that Brian, the auto broker, had texted me early this morning. Marcus reviewed the paperwork in silence. The color slowly drained from his face as he recognized the corporate notary stamp applied to a fraudulent domestic transfer. "This is a severe irregularity," he murmured, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. I nodded slowly. "My husband is attempting to use this joint banking account to launder funds originating from a fraudulent vehicle transaction," I explained. "I am formally disputing all future electronic transfers, wire requests, and debit operations." Marcus understood the liability immediately. Federal banking regulations require institutions to mitigate suspected money laundering the moment evidence is presented. He turned to his monitor and typed rapidly on his keyboard, initiating a suspicious activity report. The SAR is a silent, devastating weapon. It immediately locks the targeted account, pending a thorough internal and federal review. The account holder receives no prior warning. Jason could no longer withdraw cash. He could no longer write a check. He could not initiate a digital transfer. The financial freeze was absolute. I left the bank, stepping back into the oppressive Florida heat, and drove straight to the Regional Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. The waiting room was crowded, filled with frustrated citizens holding numbered paper tickets sitting in hard plastic chairs. The room echoed with the sounds of crying toddlers and the robotic voice calling out numbers. I waited my turn, projecting perfect patience. When my number flashed on the digital screen, I approached the counter. I presented my authentic identification and requested an affidavit of unauthorized transfer. I filled out the legal sworn statement detailing that my dark slate sedan was sold without my physical presence or legal consent. The clerk processed the affidavit, her fingers flying across the keyboard to update the state registry database. The trap was now fully operational. The vehicle title was frozen in the municipal system. Ashley could not legally register the sedan in her name. Without a valid registration, she could not purchase auto insurance. She was currently driving an uninsured, stolen asset with a suspended title on public roads. If she were pulled over for a minor traffic infraction, a broken taillight, or a speeding violation, the police would scan the plates and impound the vehicle on the spot. She was driving a liability. By noon, the temperature had reached its daily peak. I walked toward Lake Eola Park, seeking the shade of the large oak trees draped in Spanish moss. I purchased an iced black coffee from a small vendor near the water. I sat on a green-painted park bench watching the white swans glide across the surface of the lake. The water rippled gently, undisturbed by the chaos unfolding across town. I placed my mobile phone on the wooden slat of the bench next to my drink. The screen illuminated. Jason was calling. I let it ring. The vibration buzzed steadily against the wood. The call dropped into voicemail. A minute later, the device vibrated again. He was beginning to hit the invisible concrete walls I had erected throughout the morning. He had promised Brian a refund or a clean title. He could provide neither. Brian was demanding his $18,000 back immediately. Jason had tried to log into the joint bank account to access his bridge capital, only to find a bold red error message citing a compliance hold. He likely tried to call the bank customer service line and was met with a standard legal refusal to discuss a frozen asset over the phone. My phone screen updated the numerical tally. 12 missed calls. He was suffocating under the weight of his own logistics. He had zero liquidity. He had an angry commercial broker threatening him with criminal charges. He had a mistress demanding to know why her insurance agent could not process the policy on her new gift. 18 missed calls. The device vibrated continuously. The panic was radiating through the cellular towers, transmitting his sheer desperation directly to my screen. I picked up the iced coffee and took a slow, deliberate sip. The bitter, cold liquid sharpened my focus. He was currently standing in a cheap motel or his struggling office, realizing that the woman he called a human spreadsheet had just mathematically dismantled his entire survival strategy. 25 missed calls. I looked out at the tranquil water of the lake. I did not escalate the situation. I merely corrected the data. I forced the system to recognize the variables he tried to hide. I let the bureaucracy perform its intended function. The phone stopped vibrating for a brief moment. The silence was temporary. Then it rang again. This time, the caller identification did not display my husband's name. It displayed the 10-digit number for Orange Avenue Auto Brokers. Brian was calling me back. The broker had hit the same brick wall and realized Jason was dodging his demands. Brian was furious. He was holding a forged document and looking for a way to recover his cash. I picked up the phone, sliding my finger across the glass, ready to recruit my new ally. The caller identification displayed the 10-digit number for Orange Avenue Auto Brokers. I swiped the green icon across the glass and lifted the device to my ear. Renee Bryan barked, skipping any formal greeting. His voice vibrated with a tight, constrained fury. "Your husband is dodging my calls. His voicemail is full. I went to the address listed on his company website, and it is a shared co-working space. He is not there. I want my money, or I want the police." "I understand your frustration, Brian," I replied, keeping my voice even, contrasting his heat with absolute cold. "I am sitting at a cafe on the south side of Lake Eola Park. Come meet me. I have the preliminary documentation you need to file a bulletproof criminal complaint, but we must synchronize our timelines first." He hesitated, the anger warring with his business instincts. 10 minutes, he grunted and disconnected the line. Brian arrived exactly 11 minutes later. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, wearing a moisture-wicking polo shirt and dark slacks. He looked like a man who spent his life evaluating depreciating assets and negotiating hard margins. He spotted me sitting on the green bench, my posture perfectly straight, my expression devoid of panic. He walked over and sat heavily on the wooden slats next to me, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "I have been in the automotive trade for 2 decades. Brian started, his hands clasped tightly together. "I have dealt with title jumpers, odometer rollbacks, and standard thieves. But a guy walking in wearing a custom suit, flashing a corporate seal, and selling his own wife's car out from under her? That is a new level of stupid." He required immediate liquidity, I explained, offering a clinical assessment of my husband. "Jason operates an independent consulting firm that is currently bleeding capital. He used the $18,000 he stole from you to fund an apartment for his mistress. He assumed I would be too embarrassed to contest the forged signature, and he assumed you would write off the loss rather than pursue a lengthy civil litigation." Brian let out a harsh, humorless laugh. $18,000 is not a write-off. It is felony grand theft. I am calling the department." "You will call them," I agreed, turning my body slightly to face him. "But I need you to wait exactly 48 hours before you file the official wire fraud report. Right now, Jason believes he can still talk his way out of this. He thinks he can bully you into backing down, and he thinks he can manipulate me into signing the title to save his reputation. If you call the authorities today, he will immediately invoke his right to remain silent. We need him talking. We need him committing his lies to a legally binding medium. Brian studied my face. He was searching for the hysterical wife the woman scorned, the chaotic victim. He found none of those things. He found a logistics analyst drafting a supply chain of accountability. His posture relaxed marginally. He recognized that we shared a common objective. We both demanded a balanced ledger. "What is the play?" Brian asked, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Before I could outline the strategy, a loud chime erupted from Brian's pocket. He pulled out his mobile phone. The screen displayed an incoming text message from Jason. Brian let out an exasperated sigh and slid the device across the wooden slats of the bench so I could read the illuminated text. The message read, "Stop calling my phone, Brian. You have the paperwork. The delay is at the municipal office, not on my end. If you continue to harass me during business hours, I will have my attorney file a restraining order for corporate interference." It was a breathtaking display of dramatic irony. Jason was sitting in some cheap motel room or a sweltering parking lot, furiously typing threats to isolate his enemies. He believed he was projecting dominance. He thought he was dividing and conquering. He was entirely oblivious to the fact that the two people he defrauded were sitting shoulder to shoulder beneath a Spanish moss-draped oak tree, reading his extortion attempts in real time. "He wants to play the victim," Brian muttered, shaking his head in disgust. "He steals my cash and threatens me with a lawyer. Do not let him dictate the emotional tone," I instructed, tapping the edge of his phone. "We are going to use his arrogance against him. We are going to draft a response that forces him to acknowledge the exact financial figure and the location of the stolen asset. We are building your evidence file." Brian opened the keyboard on his screen. "Tell me what to type." "Keep it purely transactional," I said, analyzing the psychological angle. "Do not threaten him back. Type this. I am not harassing you, Jason. I am simply asking for the location of the dark slate sedan or the immediate return of the $18,000 in cash I handed you yesterday. Provide an update by 5 o'clock. Brian typed the sentences exactly as dictated and pressed send. We sat in the warm Florida breeze, waiting for the trap to spring. The response arrived less than 3 minutes later. The speed indicated Jason was glued to his device, his anxiety redlining. The new message read, "I told you, the money is tied up in a short-term bridge investment. You will get the car tomorrow once my wife completes the digital signature authorization. Back off, or you get nothing." I smiled. It was a cold, razor-thin expression. "Screenshot that," I told Brian. "He just admitted in writing that he took your money under false pretenses, that the funds are currently inaccessible, and that the initial power of attorney he provided you was fraudulent because he still needs my authorization. He just handed you a signed confession for wire fraud." Brian stared at the screen, a slow realization dawning on his face. The anger was replaced by a predatory satisfaction. "You are terrifying," he noted quietly. "I am thorough," I corrected him. My own mobile device vibrated in my purse. I retrieved it and looked at the lock screen. The missed call tally had climbed to 32. Jason had shifted tactics. Realizing Brian was not backing down, he was now desperately trying to reach me to secure the digital signature he needed to legitimize the sale. His text messages to my phone were a frantic mix of apologies, demands, and manipulative pleas regarding our marital vows. It was time to sever his illusions completely. I opened our text thread. I did not address his apologies. I did not ask about Ashley or the Winter Park apartment. I did not mention our wedding or the betrayal. I typed a single, meticulously crafted sentence designed to trigger a catastrophic psychological collapse. Communicate through counsel regarding the corporate signature fraud. I pressed the send icon. I watched the small green bubble appear on the screen, confirming the delivery. The inclusion of the word corporate was the kill shot. Up until this precise second, Jason believed I only knew about the car. He thought I was angry about a missing vehicle. By specifying corporate signature fraud, I explicitly informed him that I had inspected the high-resolution scans. I informed him that I had identified the blue notary stamp belonging to Strategic Growth Solutions, LLC. I informed him that I knew he had implicated his own company in a felony. I stripped away every single layer of his defensive perimeter with a single adjective. I placed my phone face up on the bench next to Brian's device. The reaction was instantaneous. The typing indicator bubbled on my screen disappeared and reappeared in a rapid, chaotic rhythm. Jason was losing his mind. His fingers were failing to hit the correct keys. When the messages finally pushed through, they were a disaster of grammatical errors and unfiltered panic. "What are you talking about? Renee, please pick up the phone." It was a mistake. The stamp was an accident. Do not call the police, please. Answer me right now. We can fix this without lawyers. I did not reply. I simply locked the screen, letting the black glass reflect the canopy of the oak tree above us. The transition was complete. He had mutated from an arrogant consultant issuing legal threats to a terrified criminal begging for mercy, all within the span of 15 minutes. Brian chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound of genuine amusement. He is falling apart. He is experiencing the consequences of his own logistics, I said, gathering my purse and standing up from the bench. Keep your phone close, Brian. Let him text you his excuses, but do not reply again today. Let him sit in the silence and imagine the worst possible outcome. I assure you, whatever he is picturing in his head is far less severe than what I have actually planned. We shook hands, a firm professional agreement between two people who refused to be victims of a narcissist. I turned and walked away from the lake, heading toward my rental car. The financial bleed had been initiated, but the administrative stranglehold was about to tighten on another front. Ashley, currently sitting in her luxury Winter Park apartment, was completely unaware that the title freeze I executed at the municipal office that morning had triggered an automatic notification to my auto insurance provider. She was holding the keys to a vehicle she believed was a grand romantic gesture. She was about to discover that a stolen car cannot be insured and a suspended title cannot be legally driven on Florida roads. She was completely exposed, and the liability was entirely hers. The federal banking hold took effect during the darkest hours of the early morning. By the time the sun began to heat the pavement of downtown Orlando, the architecture of Jason Double Life was already collapsing under its own weight. I arrived at my logistics firm early, taking my usual route to the 5th floor. I sat at my desk overlooking the city skyline and logged into my corporate terminal. My hands typed the password automatically, but my mind remained deeply focused on the mathematical execution of my husband. Without the liquid capital he scammed from the auto broker, his commercial checking accounts were starving. I had reviewed the downloaded bank statements late last night, utilizing the digital access I retained before the suspicious activity report locked the ledgers. The forensic accounting was simple and devastating. The flow of the stolen cash told a clear story. Jason had deposited $9,000 of the $18,000 he received into a secondary business account the very same afternoon he forged the title. 2 hours later, a cashier check was drafted from that exact account for $8,400. I compared that figure against the Winter Park residential lease agreement I had photographed on his laptop. The financial requirements listed on the rental contract for the first month, the last month, and the luxury security deposit equated exactly to $8,400 down to the cent. He had literally traded my state-registered vehicle to secure a premium roof for his mistress. Now the remaining funds were frozen inside the digital vault of the banking institution. Any automatic clearinghouse payments scheduled for his consulting operations were hitting a solid brick wall. The monthly commercial lease for Strategic Growth Solutions was due today. The payroll software for his single employee, the office manager, whose notary stamp he had stolen to validate his crime, would attempt to draw funds and return a severe error. Essential vendors would receive insufficient fund notices by the afternoon. In the corporate sector, a bounced check is not treated as a simple oversight. It is a loud, undeniable declaration of insolvency. Jason was losing his professional credibility, which is the only real currency an independent consultant possesses. The financial bleed was rapid and fatal. I was reviewing a maritime shipping manifest on my monitor when the receptionist sent a priority message to my communication dashboard. She stated that my husband was waiting in the main lobby. She noted that he was demanding to see me and refusing to sit in the designated visitor seating area. This was a predictable tactic. When individuals accustomed to manipulation lose control in private, they frequently attempt to manufacture compliance in public spaces. They bank on their victim wanting to avoid a scene. Jason assumed I would capitulate to his demands just to prevent a loud, embarrassing argument in front of my colleagues and regional directors. He thought the threat of public exposure in my pristine corporate environment would force me to log online, unlock the bank accounts, and withdraw the police report. He severely underestimated my preparation. I had anticipated a physical escalation the moment I sent the text message specifying the corporate signature fraud. A cornered predator always returns to the location where they believe their target is most vulnerable. Yesterday morning, before I even visited the bank to initiate the financial strike, I had scheduled a brief closed-door meeting with the building director of security. I provided a recent printed photograph of Jason and a clear, unwavering directive. He is not permitted on the 5th floor under any circumstances. I had stated. I stood up from my ergonomic chair and smoothed the lapels of my tailored navy suit jacket. I walked down the carpeted hallway toward the glass double doors of the lobby. The reception area was busy. Several vendors and department heads were standing near the marble counter waiting for their morning appointments. Jason stood near the center of the room. He looked erratic and unstable. The expensive suit he wore looked rumpled, as if he had slept in it. Dark purple circles bruised the delicate skin under his eyes. His tie was loosened, hanging unevenly around his collar. The carefully curated image of the successful real estate executive was entirely gone. In its place stood the frantic, exhausting energy of a man drowning in his own poor logistics. "Renee!" he said loudly, the moment he saw me approach the glass doors. He took 2 long strides forward, attempting to close the physical distance between us. His voice echoed off the polished marble floor, drawing the immediate attention of several nearby colleagues. "We are fixing this right now. You are going to call the bank and lift the hold. I cannot pay my office lease. My payroll just bounced. You are destroying my company over a misunderstanding." I did not shrink back from his aggression. I did not whisper or beg him to lower his voice to save face. I maintained my rigid posture, keeping my hands loosely clasped in front of me. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of an auditor reviewing a failed asset. "There is no misunderstanding, Jason," I replied evenly. My voice was calm, but it carried enough volume and precise diction to be heard clearly by anyone paying attention in the lobby. "You forged my signature using a stolen corporate seal to sell my property for cash. The federal banking authorities are currently investigating the wire fraud. I cannot lift a compliance hold triggered by your own felony." He flushed a deep, mottled red. The public exposure was burning him alive. He had come here to shame me, and instead I was broadcasting his crimes to an audience of my peers. He raised his right hand, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "You listen to me," he snarled, taking another aggressive step forward. Before his expensive leather shoe could touch the carpeted area marking the secure employee section, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stepped seamlessly between us. It was David, the head of security for the building. He was flanked immediately by two uniformed guards who moved with quiet, practiced efficiency. "Sir David said." His voice was polite, but it carried the heavy weight of absolute, undeniable authority. "You are trespassing in a secure corporate facility. You need to vacate the premises right this second, or we will involve local law enforcement." Jason froze mid-step. He looked at David, then he looked at the uniformed guards, and finally his eyes darted back to me. The brutal reality of his powerlessness washed over his features. He was standing in the center of my professional domain, attempting to assert dominance, and instead, he was being handled like a vagrant who wandered in off the street. The regional managers in the lobby were staring at him with undisguised pity and disgust. The receptionist was watching with her hand hovering over the emergency phone line. The humiliation was total, and it was entirely of his own making. I did not gloat. I did not offer a victorious smile. I simply nodded to David, acknowledging the successful intervention. Jason opened his mouth to argue, but the guards subtly shifted their stance, narrowing the physical perimeter around him. The remaining fight drained out of his posture. His shoulders slumped forward in defeat. He turned around and walked toward the elevator banks, escorted closely by the security detail. He was forced to step into the glass cab and descend to the ground floor while everyone watched. He was thrown out into the sweltering Florida heat, stripped of his dignity, his leverage, and his illusions. I turned around to walk back to my desk. The situation at the office was contained, and the perimeter was secure. As I pushed open the heavy glass doors to re-enter the logistics department, my mobile phone vibrated sharply in the pocket of my blazer. It was a priority alert from the electronic toll collection system. I retrieved the device and unlocked the digital screen. The notification displayed a fresh timestamp. My stolen dark slate sedan had just been scanned passing through a high-speed toll plaza. I read the geographic location data attached to the alert. The vehicle was nowhere near the Winter Park apartment complex. It was not even in the greater Orlando area. The car was currently traveling on Interstate 95, heading rapidly north toward the state line. The cascading financial collapse had panicked Jason, but the total loss of funds and the frozen insurance policy had terrified his mistress. She realized the money was gone and the lifestyle was a lie. Ashley was making a desperate run for it. I walked back to my desk and sat down in my ergonomic chair. The toll notification remained illuminated on my mobile device screen. Interstate 95 northbound. The geography told a very clear story. Ashley was running. The reality of a frozen bank account and an impending police investigation had shattered the grand romantic illusion my husband had built for her. When the stolen cash stops flowing, the loyalty of a mistress usually evaporates. She had likely packed her designer luggage and decided to take the brand new vehicle back to her home state. She thought she was executing a clean getaway, leaving the chaos behind her. She forgot that modern vehicles are essentially computers on wheels. I opened a specific manufacturer application on my smartphone. When I purchased the dark slate sedan 3 years ago, I registered the onboard diagnostic and navigation systems exclusively to my primary email address. I tapped the screen and a highly detailed satellite map loaded instantly. A pulsing blue dot represented my stolen property. The digital interface provided a wealth of logistical data. It showed the vehicle moving at 78 miles per hour, just past St. Augustine, approaching the southern border of Jacksonville. I could see the fuel level. I could see the tire pressure. I had the precise mile marker and the exact directional heading. She was a moving target, emitting a continuous beacon directly to my palm. I did not hesitate. I dialed the non-emergency dispatch number for the Florida Highway Patrol. A calm professional voice answered the line, identifying herself as a regional operator. I spoke with the same measured clarity I use during corporate board meetings. I am calling to report a stolen vehicle currently traveling on northbound Interstate 95, I stated. The title is officially suspended by the state due to a fraudulent transfer, and the driver is completely unauthorized. The dispatcher asked for the license plate number. I provided the alphanumeric sequence without needing to check my notes. I provided the make, the model, and the color of the sedan. Then I delivered the critical tactical data. The vehicle is equipped with a live tracking device registered in my name, I explained. The car is currently passing mile marker 314. The driver is a young, blonde female. She is maintaining a steady speed in the left lane, heading toward the city limits. The dispatcher typed rapidly on her keyboard. The crisp sound of the keys echoed through the phone receiver. I can confirm the suspended status on the registration, the operator replied. Her tone shifted, recognizing the severity and precision of the information I was providing. I am dispatching a highway patrol unit to intercept the vehicle near the upcoming county line. Stay on the line, ma'am. I remained perfectly still in my office chair. I watched the blue dot on my phone screen continue its northern trajectory. I listened to the faint radio chatter bleeding through the dispatcher's headset. 2 minutes passed, then 3. The logistics of a highway intercept require precise coordination. The patrol officers had to merge onto the interstate, identify the target, and position their cruisers safely behind the dark slate sedan without triggering a high-speed pursuit. We have visual confirmation, the dispatcher announced. The unit is initiating a traffic stop. I looked down at the satellite map. The numerical speed indicator next to the blue dot began to drop rapidly. 70, 50, 30, 0. The icon settled on the narrow shoulder of the highway just south of the Jacksonville city limits. The chase was over before Ashley even realized she was being hunted. I thanked the operator and ended the call. I leaned back in my chair, visualizing the scene unfolding hundreds of miles away. The flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the dark paint of my car. The state trooper approaching the driver's side window demanding a license and registration. Ashley fumbling through her purse, handing over documents that were mathematically worthless. The trooper running the plates and discovering the vehicle was tied to an active fraud investigation. Law enforcement protocols in this state are strict. When a driver is caught operating a vehicle with a suspended title and no valid insurance, they do not get a warning. The vehicle is immediately seized. The trooper would call for a flatbed tow truck to haul the car to a municipal impound yard. Ashley would be ordered to step out of the vehicle. She would be allowed to grab her personal luggage from the trunk, but she would not be allowed to remain in the car or catch a ride in the patrol cruiser unless she was under arrest. She would be left standing in the grass on the side of a major highway, surrounded by passing semi-trucks and suffocating Florida humidity. Her grand escape was reduced to a pedestrian stranding. 30 minutes later, my desk phone rang. It was the direct external line. Jason had bypassed my cell phone, knowing I was ignoring his mobile calls. He likely called the main company switchboard and demanded to be transferred to my extension. I picked up the heavy receiver and brought it to my ear. "Renee," he gasped. His voice was completely unhinged, stripped of all remaining pride and arrogance. It was a raw, desperate sound. He was hyperventilating. "What did you do? What did you just do?" "I located my missing asset," I replied, my voice as cool as the air conditioning pumping through the ceiling vents. "Ashley just called me, crying hysterically," he shouted. The panic distorted his words, making him sound small and pathetic. The highway patrol pulled her over. They took the keys. They loaded the car onto a tow truck. She is sitting on her suitcase on the shoulder of the interstate. She has no way to get home. She is terrified, Renee. You have to call the police back and lift the hold. Tell them it is a domestic dispute. Tell them anything. You cannot just leave her out there. I listened to his frantic pleading. He was begging me to save the woman he had chosen over our marriage. He had no liquid capital to hire a private car service to retrieve her. He had no personal vehicle to drive up there himself. His business accounts were frozen and his reputation was crumbling. He was utterly powerless. He wanted me to fix a crisis he had manufactured because he lacked the resources to manage it. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult his mistress. I delivered a single, devastating truth. I am not responsible for pedestrians, I said. I placed the receiver back onto the cradle, severing the connection. The click echoed softly in my quiet office. Jason was now trapped in Orlando with an empty bank account and a furious mistress demanding a rescue he could not afford. The financial and legal perimeter was perfectly secure. His operation was entirely dismantled. Yet, desperate men often seek allies when their own strength fails. Jason was out of options, but he still had family members who believed he was a good man. I knew it was only a matter of time before he sent someone else to fight his battle. The evening settled over the quiet suburban streets, wrapping the neighborhood in a blanket of heavy humidity and fading twilight. I sat at my dining room table, reviewing the digital files my attorney had prepared for the upcoming week. The house was peaceful. The silence was a profound luxury after the chaotic friction of the past 2 days. The doorbell chimed, breaking the stillness. I closed my laptop and walked to the entryway. Looking through the glass side panel, I saw a familiar figure standing on the porch. It was Laura. She is Jason's older sister. For her entire adult life, Laura has worked as a public school administrator, a career built on patience, mediation, and resolving conflicts. She possesses a deep-seated nurturing instinct that her brother has exploited since they were children. Whenever Jason failed a college course, wrecked a vehicle, or overdrawn a checking account, Laura was the one who smoothed the rough edges of his mistakes. She viewed him as a fundamentally decent person who simply struggled with the pressures of adulthood. She was his eternal safety net. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Laura stood there holding her purse tightly against her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed, indicating she had been crying recently. Her posture was defensive, but pleading. "Renee," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know it is late. I know you probably do not want to see anyone from our family right now, but I really need to talk to you. Please." I stepped aside, allowing her to enter the foyer. I guided her into the living room, gesturing toward the beige linen sofa. She sat down, perched on the very edge of the cushion as if ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. I offered her a glass of water, which she declined with a quick shake of her head. I sat in the armchair opposite her, keeping my posture relaxed but formal. "Jason called me 2 hours ago," Laura said, twisting the strap of her purse. "He is staying in a discount motel near the airport. He has no access to his funds. He told me about the car and the broker. He told me about the girl." She paused, searching my face for a reaction. Finding only a calm, receptive gaze, she continued her rehearsed plea. "He is devastated, Renee. He is sitting in that miserable room, sobbing. He knows he made a terrible error in judgment. The pressure of running his consulting business just broke him. He was desperate for capital to keep the firm afloat, and he panicked. The affair was just a symptom of his mental breakdown. It meant nothing." I listened without interrupting. It is a fascinating psychological phenomenon to watch an enabler construct a protective narrative around a predator. "He wants to make things right," Laura pleaded, leaning forward. But he cannot fix anything while he is locked out of his accounts and facing criminal charges from that auto broker. You have to call the bank and lift the fraud alert. You have to withdraw the municipal hold on the vehicle. If the police arrest him, he will lose his broker license permanently. Family forgives Renee. You have to give him a chance to earn back your trust. Do not ruin his life over a stress-induced mistake. I stood up from the armchair. I did not raise my voice or offer a sharp retort. I walked to the dining room table, retrieved my laptop, and returned to the living room. I placed the computer on the glass coffee table directly in front of Laura. I opened the lid and woke the screen. Forgiveness requires full transparency, I stated evenly. I want to show you the exact nature of his stress-induced mistake. I opened the spreadsheet I had compiled the previous night. I navigated to the first tab displaying the toll road logs. I walked her through the data points, explaining how the dates and times aligned perfectly with the days Jason claimed to be working late to secure their future. I opened the photographs of the Winter Park residential lease agreement, showing his signature acting as the financial guarantor for a luxury apartment. Laura stared at the screen, her brow furrowed. "It is awful," she whispered, her voice wavering. "But men do stupid things when they are seeking an escape from financial ruin." "He was not escaping financial ruin, Laura," I corrected her. "He was financing it." I clicked to the third tab in my digital workbook. This was the deeper audit I had conducted after discovering the forged corporate notary stamp. When a logistics analyst uncovers a singular point of failure, they do not stop investigating. They trace the entire supply chain back to its origin. I had decided to track the initial seed money Jason used to launch Strategic Growth Solutions 2 years ago. He had always claimed the startup capital came from a silent angel investor he met at a commercial real estate seminar. I pulled up the initial banking deposits for his firm. The routing numbers attached to the incoming wire transfers did not belong to an angel investor. They belonged to a regional secondary lending institution. "Look at the origin of his operational capital," I instructed, pointing at the screen. He received a disbursement of $150,000 24 months ago. I clicked a hyperlink connecting the bank routing data to the public property records hosted on the county clerk website. A digitized legal document materialized on the screen. It was a home equity line of credit. It was a secondary mortgage binding a residential property to a severe debt burden in exchange for liquid cash. I scrolled down to the property address listed on the loan. It was a charming single-family home located on Maple Street in a quiet subdivision. It was Laura's primary residence. Laura stopped breathing. The ambient hum of the central air conditioning seemed to magnify in the sudden silence of the living room. Her eyes darted back and forth across the screen, reading the legal jargon, the property parcel number, and the recorded debt amount. How she choked out the word barely audible. I scrolled to the final page of the document. I showed her the signature line. Her name was printed in her own handwriting. It was not a forgery. It was authentic. "Do you remember signing any administrative paperwork for him 2 years ago?" I asked, my tone gentle but unrelenting. "Perhaps a character reference for his state license renewal? Or a guarantor form for his office space?" The blood drained from Laura's face, leaving her skin a pale ashen gray. Her hands began to tremble violently. She reached out and touched the edge of the laptop screen, tracing her own digital signature. "He came over for dinner," she whispered, staring blankly at the glass display. "He brought a stack of documents. He said the state required an immediate family member to verify his residential history for his new brokerage firm. He was in such a rush. He told me to just sign the sticky tabs. I never read the underlying pages." He slipped a secondary deed of trust into the stack, I explained. He used his credentials as a real estate professional to originate a loan against the equity in your home. He bound you to a six-figure debt without your knowledge. I navigated back to the financial ledger showing where that specific loan money went over the past 2 years. The funds did not build a legitimate consulting firm. The spreadsheet clearly traced the disbursements to expensive restaurant tabs, luxury vehicle leases, high-end retail purchases, and the initial deposits for Ashley's apartments. He did not just steal my car, I said, stepping back from the coffee table. He mortgaged your entire future to fund his double life. Every time he took his mistress to a premium steakhouse, he paid for the meal using the equity in the home where you raise your children. Laura covered her mouth with both hands, a choked sob escaping her throat. The nurturing, protective older sister vanished in an instant. She was replaced by a woman who realized she had been bled dry by a predator wearing a familiar face. The profound betrayal shattered her lifelong illusion of her brother. She was not looking at a stressed businessman who made a mistake. She was looking at a sociopath who viewed his own family as a line of credit. I am not ruining his life, Laura, I stated, delivering the final truth. I am refusing to be an accomplice. Laura closed the laptop with a sharp, definitive snap. She stood up from the sofa, her trembling hands transforming into clenched fists. The tears in her eyes dried up, replaced by a cold, furious clarity. She did not ask me to lift the bank holds anymore. She did not mention forgiveness. I am calling my attorney, she declared, her voice stripped of all its former warmth. I am going to the district attorney office tomorrow morning to file a report for mortgage fraud and elder financial exploitation, since my name is on a trust with our mother. He is going to lose everything. She walked toward the front door, her steps heavy and purposeful. She did not look back as she exited my house, letting the door click shut behind her. Jason was now entirely isolated. He had driven away his wife. He had defrauded a commercial broker. He had stranded his mistress, and now he had weaponized his own sister against him. There was no safety net left to catch him. He was suspended in free fall. I walked back to the dining room table and opened my laptop once again. A new email waited in my inbox from my legal counsel. It was a formal calendar invitation. The opposing counsel had requested an emergency deposition for the following afternoon in a desperate attempt to untangle the frozen assets. Jason was walking blindly into a sterile boardroom, expecting to negotiate a settlement. He had no idea he was stepping onto a battlefield where his surrender was the only acceptable outcome. The emergency deposition convened precisely at 2 o'clock on a blindingly bright Thursday afternoon. The venue was a sterile boardroom located on the 42nd floor of a prestigious downtown legal firm. The air conditioning hummed a low, relentless note, chilling the expansive glass-walled room to an uncomfortable temperature. The polished mahogany table stretched the length of the space, reflecting the harsh overhead fluorescent lights. It was an environment designed for intimidation and absolute precision. I sat beside my attorney, Diane. She is a veteran litigator with a reputation for dissecting opposing counsel with surgical efficiency. Diane possesses an uncanny ability to remain completely impassive during high-stress negotiations. She does not raise her voice. She simply allows the weight of irrefutable evidence to crush the opposition. Across the wide expanse of mahogany sat Jason and his hastily retained legal counsel. His attorney was a much younger man, projecting an artificial confidence that failed to mask a distinct lack of preparation. Jason looked physically degraded. The tailored suit he wore hung loosely on his frame. The confident consultant swagger was entirely absent. He was sweating profusely despite the freezing ambient temperature of the room. He wiped his damp forehead repeatedly with a white cotton handkerchief. He was a man cornered by his own logistics, desperately hoping a legal technicality could save him. The court reporter, positioned at the head of the table, initialized her stenography machine. The rhythmic tapping of the keys commenced, signaling the formal commencement of the proceedings. Jason's attorney launched the opening salvo. He leaned forward, adopting a posture of earnest negotiation. We are here today to resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding the liquidation of marital assets, he began, his tone smooth and placating. My client acknowledges that the sale of the vehicle was executed without prior consultation. However, we contend that Mr. Henderson acted under extreme financial duress. The action was an impulsive decision, driven by the desperate need to generate emergency bridge capital to sustain his legitimate commercial enterprise. The intent was never malicious theft. The intent was to save the family business from imminent collapse. I maintained my neutral expression, staring directly at Jason. He refused to meet my gaze, keeping his eyes fixed on the grain of the wooden table. He was hiding behind the fabricated narrative of the stressed provider making a difficult sacrifice. Therefore, his attorney continued, emboldened by our silence. We propose a mutual cessation of hostilities. If your client agrees to withdraw the municipal fraud affidavit and the federal banking holds, Mr. Henderson will commit to a structured repayment plan. We can resolve this matter civilly without destroying a viable business operation. The room fell quiet, save for the soft clicking of the stenographer keys. Diane allowed the silence to stretch, letting the younger attorney stew in his own opening statement. Then she reached into her black leather briefcase. That is an interesting narrative, counselor, Diane stated, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Let us examine the precise application of this emergency bridge capital. She retrieved a single sheet of paper from a manila folder. She slid it across the polished mahogany table, stopping it precisely in front of Jason and his attorney. This is a time-stamped banking receipt retrieved during our preliminary discovery process, Diane explained. It details the deposit of $18,000 in cash initiated by your client at 4:30 in the afternoon on the date the vehicle was fraudulently sold. Jason's attorney picked up the document, his brow furrowing as he read the data. Now Diane continued, producing a second sheet of paper and sliding it across the table. This document is a certified transaction record from a luxury jewelry retailer located in the mall at Millennia. It is time-stamped less than 1 hour after the cash deposit. It confirms the purchase of a lady's Cartier wristwatch for a total of $4,200. Jason closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. And finally, Diane said, sliding a third document across the expanse. This is a cleared cashier check drafted from the same account the very next morning. The amount is exactly $8,400. The payee is the property management group handling the luxury Winter Park residential complex where your client Mistress currently resides. Diane leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly on the table. The $18,000 your client obtained by forging his wife's signature was not utilized to save a legitimate commercial enterprise. The funds were immediately deployed to purchase high-end jewelry and secure premium housing for his extramarital partner. The bridge capital defense is mathematically false. It is obliterated by the empirical evidence. The younger attorney stared at the 3 documents. The color drained from his face as he realized he had been fed a completely fabricated defense strategy by his own client. He looked at Jason, his expression morphing from professional support to sheer, unadulterated anger. He was sitting in a deposition, attempting to negotiate a settlement based on lies that were instantly disproved by time-stamped receipts. My client committed wire fraud, identity theft, and corporate malfeasance. Diane continued, not allowing the opposition a moment to recover. He utilized a notary stamp belonging to Strategic Growth Solutions, LLC, to falsify a state transfer document. He entangled his corporate entity in a multi-party felony. She paused, letting the severity of the charges settle over the room. Furthermore, Diane added, retrieving one final document from her briefcase. Our forensic audit uncovered a secondary line of credit originated by your client 2 years ago. He utilized his professional real estate credentials to fraudulently secure a 6-figure mortgage against the primary residence of his sister Laura. He diverted those funds into the very same commercial accounts he used to finance his affair. Jason's head snapped up. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with absolute terror. He had believed that the mortgage fraud was buried so deeply in his corporate ledgers that it would never be uncovered. He thought he had successfully isolated his crimes. Your client has engaged in a systematic pattern of financial exploitation, utilizing marital and familial assets to fund his personal indiscretions, Diane stated. Because he commingled these illicit funds with his commercial operations, and because he utilized marital capital to secure the commercial lease for his office space, we are filing an immediate motion. Diane slid the heavy legal motion across the table. We are petitioning the court for the immediate seizure of all business assets associated with Strategic Growth Solutions, LLC, to satisfy the stolen funds and the mounting legal fees incurred by my client. We are dismantling the company. The silence that followed was absolute. The young attorney did not attempt a rebuttal. There was no defense left to offer. The narrative of the struggling businessman had been thoroughly eviscerated. Jason stared at me across the wide mahogany table. The realization of his total defeat washed over him visibly. He was not just losing his marriage. He was not just facing criminal charges from the auto broker. He was losing his consulting firm, his professional reputation, and his ability to generate income. The company he built on the backs of stolen equity and forged signatures was being legally dismantled right in front of him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words materialized. He was utterly broken by the weight of his own logistics. I held his gaze, my expression perfectly neutral. I did not offer a victorious smile. I simply watched the inevitable consequence of a man who thought he could outsmart a logistics analyst. The deposition concluded shortly after the delivery of the seizure motion. Jason and his attorney left the room without another word. The legal perimeter was sealed. The financial destruction of his enterprise was guaranteed. Yet the physical retrieval of my stolen property remained unresolved. Ashley was stranded in Jacksonville, but my vehicle was sitting in a municipal impound yard hundreds of miles away. It was time to physically reclaim my autonomy. The drive north on Interstate 95 offered a necessary buffer between the sterile intensity of the legal boardroom and the physical retrieval of my property. I navigated the rental vehicle through the dense pine forests and flat wetlands that divide Central Florida from the coastal borders. The sky above was a pale, washed-out blue, typical of the late afternoon heat. My mind cataloged the events of the deposition, sorting the data points into neat mental folders. The strategy had executed flawlessly, but a logistics professional understands that a recovery operation is never truly complete until the asset is secured in hand. The Jacksonville Municipal Impound Yard was a stark contrast to the polished mahogany and pristine glass of the downtown law firm. It sat on the industrial edge of the city, flanked by active train tracks and concrete manufacturing plants. I pulled the rental car into the small visitor parking area. The tires crunched over white gravel, kicking up a cloud of fine, chalky dust that immediately coated the lower panels of the doors. A tall chain-link fence topped with coiled razor wire surrounded the perimeter, holding hundreds of seized vehicles hostage under the punishing sun. I stepped out into the sweltering air carrying my leather portfolio. The smell of hot asphalt, leaked motor oil, and diesel exhaust hung thick in the atmosphere. I walked into the small cinder block office serving as the administrative hub. The room was cramped, cooled by a struggling window air conditioning unit that rattled loudly against the wall. A clerk sat behind a thick panel of scuffed plexiglass, staring at a computer monitor. I approached the service slot and slid my authentic identification underneath the barrier. "I am here to retrieve a vehicle impounded yesterday evening by the Highway Patrol," I stated. The clerk typed my name into his database. He asked for the vehicle identification number, which I provided from memory. He nodded, reading the digital notes attached to the file. "The system shows a fraud alert and a suspended title transfer," he noted, his voice muffled by the thick plastic partition. I unzipped my portfolio and extracted the notarized affidavit of unauthorized transfer approved by the Regional Motor Vehicle Department. I also provided the formal release authorization transmitted by the state troopers following the traffic stop. I passed the crisp documents through the narrow slot. The clerk reviewed the paperwork, verifying the municipal seals and the time-stamped signatures. "Everything appears to be in order," he confirmed. "There is a processing and overnight storage fee required for the release." I extracted my private debit card tied to the new independent account I had established during the financial freeze. I inserted the chip into the payment terminal. When the transaction cleared, the clerk printed a physical receipt. I reviewed the printed ink carefully before stepping away from the window. I verified that the paperwork listed my legal name and designated me as the sole owner of the recovered property. The documentation was pristine. A yard attendant wearing a high-visibility vest unlocked a heavy steel gate and gestured for me to follow him into the sprawling lot. We walked down long rows of abandoned sedans, wrecked trucks, and confiscated sports cars. The heat radiating off the metal chassis created visible waves of distortion in the air. We turned a corner, and I spotted it. My dark slate sedan sat parked between a rusted pickup truck and a faded commercial van. The exterior paint was coated in a thin layer of highway grime from its forced journey north. The attendant verified the license plate against his clipboard, handed me the key fob, and walked away, leaving me alone with the vehicle. I approached the driver's side door. I looked through the tempered glass of the windshield. Resting squarely on the center of the dashboard was a pair of oversized, cheap plastic sunglasses with rose-tinted lenses. Ashley had left them behind when the troopers ordered her out of the cabin. I pressed the unlock button on the fob. The mechanical click echoed in the quiet yard. I opened the heavy door and reached inside. I picked up the sunglasses by the edge of the plastic frame, holding them suspended in the air. They were a physical remnant of the intrusion. They represented the false entitlement Jason had manufactured for his mistress. I did not break them. I did not crush them under my heel. I turned around, walked 10 paces to a rusted steel garbage drum situated near a light pole, and dropped the plastic frames into the trash. It was a clinical disposal of refuse. I returned to the open door and slid into the driver's seat. The moment I closed the door, the ambient scent of the cabin hit my senses. It was a synthetic, overly sweet floral perfume mixed with the stale odor of panic sweat. It was the physical contamination of my private space. Ashley had saturated the enclosed cabin with her presence, leaving behind a chemical footprint of the betrayal. A lesser person might have wept, gripping the steering wheel while consumed by the ghost of the affair. I simply rolled down all 4 windows to create a cross breeze and started the ignition. The engine hummed to life, operating with perfect mechanical precision. I drove the sedan out of the impound yard and navigated away from the industrial district. I did not route the digital map back to Orlando. I searched for a premium automotive detailing center located in the upscale commercial sector of Jacksonville. I arrived 20 minutes later, pulling the car into a pristine, brightly lit service bay. I approached the service manager standing behind a polished reception counter. "I need a comprehensive interior extraction," I instructed. "I want the upholstery steam cleaned, the carpets shampooed, and the cabin subjected to a medical-grade ozone treatment. Eradicate every biological and chemical scent inside that vehicle. The manager noted the firm, uncompromising tone in my voice and immediately assigned 2 technicians to the task. I relocated to the climate-controlled customer lounge, taking a seat in a quiet corner. I opened my mobile device to monitor my incoming communications. A brief, encrypted email waited in my inbox, sent by Diane following our departure from the deposition. The message contained a succinct update on the fallout occurring back in Central Florida. The commercial landlord managing the office space for Strategic Growth Solutions had served Jason with a formal eviction notice that morning. The monthly rent check drafted by his company had bounced, due to the federal Suspicious Activity Report freezing his ledgers. When the landlord attempted to contact Jason to demand a certified replacement payment, Jason was entirely unreachable, trapped inside our legal deposition. Operating under a strict commercial lease clause, the property management company invoked their right to immediate possession. Jason was granted a 2-hour window to clear his personal effects from the suite before the building security permanently deactivated his electronic access badge. A second email followed shortly after, containing an update gathered during the discovery phase of the impending divorce. The information detailed the rapid disintegration of Jason's personal illusion. Ashley had vanished. When she found herself stranded on the shoulder of Interstate 95, she realized the luxurious lifestyle promised to her was a hollow fabrication. The car was stolen. The bank accounts were empty. The man funding her rent was facing a multi-party felony investigation. She did not wait for Jason to figure out a rescue plan. She called a relative to retrieve her from the highway. She returned to the Winter Park apartment, packed her designer luggage, and vacated the premises before the evening ended. She blocked Jason on every digital platform, severing all communication. The romantic fantasy evaporated the precise second the financing dried up, leaving him entirely isolated. Revenge is rarely a loud, dramatic confrontation. True retaliation is found in the quiet, methodical enforcement of boundaries. It is stepping aside and allowing a person poor choices to naturally destroy their environment, while you sit in a quiet room, waiting for your property to be restored. 2 hours later, the service manager approached my chair holding my key fob. The detailing process was complete. I walked into the service bay and opened the door of my sedan. The sweet, sickening smell of the floral perfume was entirely gone. The cabin smelled only of crisp ozone and fresh leather cleaner. Every surface was sanitized, restored to its original, immaculate condition. I settled into the driver's seat and adjusted the rearview mirror. I merged onto the southbound lanes of the interstate, pointing the vehicle toward home. My personal environment was cleansed, but the final regulatory destruction of Jason's professional career remained pending. The municipal authorities were preparing to review the forged corporate seal, setting the stage for the ultimate collapse of his remaining credentials. The machinery of state regulation moves with a slow, grinding inevitability until it locates a verified infraction. Once a statutory violation is confirmed, the bureaucracy accelerates, operating with a merciless mechanical efficiency. The Florida Real Estate Commission does not tolerate fraudulent actors operating within its jurisdiction. They govern the licensing of every broker and sales associate in the state, demanding strict adherence to ethical and legal statutes. When Brian marched into the municipal police precinct and filed a formal complaint for wire fraud and the presentation of a forged power of attorney, he initiated a sequence of events that Jason could not charm his way out of. The detective assigned to the Commercial Fraud Division pulled the sworn affidavit I had filed with the Department of Motor Vehicles. The investigator cross-referenced the fake document against the corporate notary log assigned to Strategic Growth Solutions. The evidence was unquestionable. It did not rely on hearsay or emotional testimony. It was built entirely on matching timestamps, verified IP addresses, and state-mandated paper trails. Law enforcement forwarded the preliminary findings directly to the regulatory board in Tallahassee. A broker license is not a permanent right. It is a conditional privilege. The commission issued an emergency suspension order pending a formal criminal hearing. The decree was transmitted via certified mail to the registered business address of Jason Firm. Because the commercial landlord had already evicted him, the document was routed to his secondary contact location. The suspension stripped him of his ability to legally negotiate property contracts, collect commissions, or represent commercial clients anywhere within the state borders. Without a valid brokerage license, Strategic Growth Solutions ceased to exist as a functional entity. A consulting firm built on real estate acquisitions cannot operate when its founder is legally barred from the industry. The business was already starving from the frozen banking accounts, but the regulatory suspension delivered the fatal blow. The remaining clients who had not yet been impacted by the bounced checks received automated notifications regarding the license status. In the corporate sector, reputation is fragile. When investors discover a managing partner is under investigation for a multi-party felony, they sever ties immediately. The exodus was instantaneous. Jason was entirely contained. He was no longer a consultant making moves in the commercial sector. He was an unemployed liability living out of a discount motel, relying on a dwindling supply of cash to purchase basic necessities. The carefully tailored suits he used to project dominance were hanging in a cheap laminate wardrobe. The expensive dinners and the luxury leased vehicles were ghosts of a life he could no longer afford. He had traded a stable, lucrative career and a secure marriage for a handful of stolen cash that evaporated in less than 48 hours. I was sitting at my home office desk reviewing regional shipping manifests when my mobile device vibrated against the wooden surface. I unlocked the screen. A single text message from Jason appeared in the notification center. He was no longer blocked from texting my personal number because the formal legal perimeter established by my attorney allowed for basic logistical communication regarding the divorce. The message contained 5 words. You won. I have nothing. I stared at the glowing letters. A person driven by malice might have smiled. They might have taken a screenshot and sent a taunting reply, reveling in the complete destruction of their enemy. I felt no triumphant joy. Victory implies a contest, and I never viewed this situation as a game. I viewed it as an audit. The ledger was unbalanced when he forged my signature and stole a state-registered asset to impress his mistress. The ledger was now balanced. He wanted me to feel sorry for him. He wanted me to acknowledge his defeat, hoping that my pity might translate into a sudden leniency. He still believed he was the main character in a tragedy, rather than the architect of his own ruin. I pressed my finger against the screen and swiped left. The delete icon appeared in stark red. I tapped the button. The message vanished, erasing his final attempt at emotional manipulation from my device. I did not type a response. I placed the phone back on the desk and returned my attention to the shipping manifests. Silence remained my most devastating weapon. The following morning, I drove back to the downtown sector. The oppressive humidity had broken overnight, replaced by a rare, crisp breeze rolling off the nearby lakes. I parked my newly detailed sedan near the same cafe where I had forged a tactical alliance with the commercial auto broker just a few days prior. The environment looked exactly the same, but the underlying variables had completely shifted. Brian was already sitting at a small wrought iron table on the outdoor patio. He wore a dark button-down shirt and held a ceramic mug of dark roast coffee. He spotted me approaching and stood up, offering a firm nod of respect. He did not look like a man who was out $18,000. He looked like a predator who had successfully cornered his prey. I took the seat across from him and ordered a simple black iced tea.
It is done.
Brian announced before the server even walked away. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the metal table. The detective called him in for an interview yesterday afternoon. They presented the forged bill of sale, the fake corporate notary seal, and the text messages he sent me admitting the funds were inaccessible. They gave him a very clear choice: walk out in handcuffs facing felony grand theft and wire fraud charges, or make the victim whole immediately. How did he manage to produce the capital, I asked, knowing his accounts were still locked under the federal suspicious activity report? He did not produce the capital, Brian replied, a cold, hard smile touching the corners of his mouth. He produced a signature. The detective allowed us to draft a civil restitution agreement in lieu of immediate prosecution. Jason signed a legally binding promissory note carrying a punitive interest rate. He essentially mortgaged whatever future earnings he manages to scrape together after his license suspension. If he misses a single payment by so much as an hour, the civil agreement voids and the district attorney files the criminal indictment. He is tethered to you, I observed, analyzing the structure of the trap. He is my indentured servant until the balance is cleared, Brian corrected him. He will be bagging groceries or digging ditches to meet the monthly minimums because he cannot sell real estate anymore. I secured my investment, and I secured a penalty fee for the inconvenience. It was a brutal financial garrote. Jason had avoided a physical jail cell only to lock himself inside a fiscal prison. He would spend the next several years working menial jobs, handing the majority of his wages directly to the man he tried to scam. He was permanently shackled to his own poor decisions. We accomplished the objective I stated, lifting my glass of iced tea. Brian picked up his ceramic mug. We tapped the rims together, a quiet clink of porcelain and glass echoing over the patio. It was a toast between two professionals who refused to be victims of a narcissist. We finished our drinks in comfortable silence, appreciating the smooth mechanics of accountability. When we parted ways, we shook hands firmly, knowing we would likely never need to speak again. The partnership was dissolved because the mission was complete. I drove my pristine, sanitized vehicle back to the quiet Windermere subdivision. The suburban streets were empty save for a few landscaping crews working on the manicured lawns. I pulled into my driveway and walked toward the brick pillar housing the aluminum mailbox. I retrieved a small stack of envelopes. Most were standard utility bills and local advertisements. Nestled in the center of the stack was a thick manila envelope bearing the return address of the county circuit court. I carried the mail inside the house, locking the heavy front door behind me. I walked into the kitchen, placing my keys on the marble island. I slid my index finger under the flap of the manila envelope and tore it open. I extracted a sheaf of dense legal documents printed on heavy bond paper. The top page bore the official seal of the municipal judge. It was the final decree of dissolution of marriage. The swiftness of the process was a direct result of Jason's complete lack of resources. A contested divorce requires capital to fund attorneys, paralegals, and court filings. Because I had successfully frozen his bank accounts, seized his corporate assets, and exposed his mortgage fraud, he had absolutely no leverage to demand a trial. His young attorney had withdrawn from the case, citing a lack of payment, shortly after the disastrous deposition. Jason was forced to sign the uncontested settlement agreement exactly as my counsel drafted it. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb. The legal contract that bound me to a deceitful man was officially terminated. However, the division of the marital assets still required one final signature in the presence of a municipal clerk. The decree instructed both parties to appear at the downtown courthouse the following morning to finalize the property transfers. Jason would have to stand in the blinding Florida sun and sign away the remnants of his life. The morning sun hanging over downtown Orlando was blinding. The intense heat radiated off the concrete sidewalks, creating a visible shimmer in the dense, humid air. I parked my newly sanitized sedan in a secured municipal garage and walked toward the imposing architecture of the county courthouse. The building was a massive structure of glass and steel, projecting an aura of absolute governmental authority. I bypassed the lingering crowds near the entrance and proceeded through the metal detectors with the practiced efficiency of a woman who possessed zero liabilities. My legal counsel had already filed the finalized settlement agreement with the municipal clerk. Because Jason lacked the financial liquidity to retain new representation after his first attorney abandoned him, he was forced to navigate the judicial system entirely alone. A contested dissolution of marriage requires significant capital to fund endless discovery motions and courtroom appearances. Jason possessed no capital. His bank ledgers were frozen by a federal suspicious activity report. His commercial real estate license was suspended by the state regulatory board. His consulting firm was evicted from its office space. He possessed absolutely no leverage to negotiate the terms of our separation. The division of our marital estate was overwhelmingly in my favor. I retained sole ownership of the Windermere property. I kept the entirety of my corporate retirement portfolios. I secured clear, unencumbered title to my vehicle. Jason was legally assigned the totality of the debt associated with his failed commercial enterprise. He was also legally bound to the punitive civil restitution plan he had signed with Brian, the auto broker. I did not take these assets out of malice. I retained them because the mathematical reality of his theft demanded a severe recalibration of our shared equity. I arrived on the 4th floor and walked down a long corridor illuminated by harsh fluorescent lighting. The air conditioning was freezing, contrasting sharply with the sweltering outdoor temperature. I spotted Jason sitting on a hard wooden bench situated outside the clerk-designated office. The physical deterioration of the man I married was striking. Just 2 weeks prior, he had strutted through our kitchen wearing tailored lounge pants and a condescending smirk. Today, he looked as though he had aged a decade. The expensive, custom suits he used to project dominance were gone. He wore a simple beige dress shirt that was poorly ironed and a pair of faded slacks. His shoulders slumped forward, pulling his posture into a permanent cringe of defeat. The trademark arrogance that defined his entire personality was entirely eroded. I approached the wooden bench. He looked up at me and his eyes were hollow. He did not offer a greeting. He simply stood up and followed me into the municipal office to sign the final localized paperwork. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the counter while a bored municipal clerk retrieved our file. The clerk handed Jason a blue ballpoint pen and pointed to a series of yellow adhesive tabs indicating where his signature was required. Jason grasped the pen. His hand was shaking. He was signing away the last remaining fragments of a life he had systematically destroyed. As he flipped through the dense pages of the settlement decree, his eyes caught on a specific clause outlined in bold typography near the bottom of the property division section. He stopped reading. A look of sheer confusion and sudden panic washed over his exhausted features. He stared at the paragraph detailing the forfeiture of a concealed investment ledger. During the intensive forensic audit of his commercial firm, I did not stop at identifying the fraudulent mortgage he extracted from his sister. I traced the flow of those borrowed funds with surgical precision. Jason had not spent every single dollar on his mistress or his failing business. He had quietly diverted $75,000 into a hidden offshore brokerage portfolio. He intended to keep a secret reserve of liquid capital safely tucked away from my view. When the court mandated full financial transparency during the initial discovery phase of our divorce, Jason submitted a sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury. He deliberately omitted the hidden investment portfolio from his official declaration. He assumed my audit had missed it. He was mistaken. Diane submitted the time-stamped routing numbers and the portfolio statements directly to the presiding judge. In the family court system, financial perjury is considered a direct insult to the authority of the magistrate. The judge did not merely divide the concealed funds. The magistrate issued a punitive sanction against Jason for attempting to defraud the court. As a direct penalty for his documented perjury, the judge awarded me the entirety of the hidden $75,000 reserve. Jason read the sanction clause on the paper. He realized that the secret safety net he had sacrificed his own sister to build was now legally my property. He opened his mouth to protest, but the clerk tapped the counter impatiently, demanding he finish the required signatures. Jason swallowed hard, closing his mouth. He pressed the blue pen to the paper and signed his name, transferring the final remnant of his wealth into my possession. The clerk stamped the documents with a heavy metal seal. The marriage was officially terminated. We walked out of the administrative office and descended in the crowded elevator in total silence. We exited the courthouse through the heavy revolving glass doors, stepping back into the oppressive, blinding Florida heat. The transition from the freezing interior to the sweltering street level was jarring. Jason stopped near the bottom of the concrete steps. He turned to face me. The hollow look in his eyes was replaced by a profound, desperate sadness. He was standing on the sidewalk, stripped of his career, his reputation, his family support, and his secret financial reserves. "Renee," he said, his voice barely rising above the ambient noise of the downtown traffic. He looked at the ground, unable to maintain eye contact. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." It was a quiet apology. It was stripped of his usual manipulative charm. He wanted me to believe that the catastrophic collapse of his life was an unintended accident, rather than the predictable outcome of his own deliberate choices. He wanted absolution. I looked at him standing in the bright sunlight. My expression remained perfectly neutral. I did not feel pity. I did not feel residual anger. I felt the profound clarity of a balanced equation. "You meant for it to go exactly as far as it did," I replied, my tone even and unyielding. "You just did not expect me to check the audit trail." He flinched as the truth struck him. He had no defense left to offer. I lowered my gaze, analyzing his physical posture one final time. My eyes settled on his footwear. He was wearing a pair of dark leather Oxford shoes. A month ago, those shoes were immaculate, polished weekly to project an image of effortless wealth. Today, the leather was dull and heavily creased. The left toe cap was deeply scuffed, revealing the raw, untreated material beneath the surface dye. The heel was worn down unevenly from dragging against the pavement. Looking at those ruined, scuffed shoes, a specific memory surfaced with vivid clarity. I remembered the afternoon I walked out of my corporate office to find my parking space empty. I remembered staring at the concrete asphalt, reading the text message informing me to take the bus. I remembered looking down near the toe of my work pump and seeing a palmetto bug crushed flat against the stone. The insect had wandered into a hostile environment, assuming it owned the space. It had operated with a blind, instinctual arrogance, entirely oblivious to the heavy tread coming down from above. Jason was exactly like that crushed insect. He had wandered into the domain of a logistics analyst, assuming he could steal a state-registered asset and manipulate the supply chain of our marriage without consequence. He had operated with a blind, unearned arrogance. He was completely flattened by a force he simply did not respect. I did not offer him a goodbye. I did not wish him well. I turned my back to him and walked down the concrete sidewalk toward the municipal parking garage. My heels clicked a steady, decisive rhythm against the pavement. I left him standing alone on the courthouse steps, anchored to the consequences of his own terrible logistics. The ledger was closed. The asset was recovered. The next phase of my life required no further input from him. The concrete pillars of the municipal parking structure cast heavy shadows across the lower levels, offering a brief respite from the punishing morning sun. I walked through the quiet garage, the sound of my heels clicking a steady, measured rhythm against the swept cement floor. The dark slate sedan rested in a corner spot, isolated from the surrounding commuter vehicles. The fresh paint gleamed a flawless mirror, reflecting the overhead fluorescent tubes. Pressing the unlock button on the key fob produced a sharp, satisfying mechanical chirp. I opened the heavy driver's side door and slid onto the premium upholstery. The interior environment was a triumph of chemical eradication. The high-end detailing service had utilized industrial ozone generators to purge the cabin overnight. The lingering synthetic floral perfume that once contaminated this enclosed space was eradicated. The air inside smelled solely of rich leather conditioner and crisp, sterile purification. The physical footprint of the affair was gone, scrubbed away by professionals and paid for with a simple swipe of a debit card. I inserted the key and ignited the engine. The machinery responded instantly, settling into a low, steady idle. I reversed out of the space and navigated the spiraling concrete ramps toward the exit barrier. Emerging from the shadowed garage, the midday Florida glare struck the windshield with a fierce, blinding intensity. I lowered the polarized visor, shielding my eyes from the harsh light. The dashboard clock displayed a few minutes past noon. The final settlement decree carrying the raised, embossed seal of the county magistrate rested securely inside my leather tote bag on the passenger seat. The document represented the official termination of a fraudulent partnership. It also represented the transfer of a hidden $75,000 investment portfolio into my private ledger. The financial penalty awarded by the presiding judge provided a comfortable cushion, though the monetary gain mattered far less than the mathematical justice it signified. The ledger was balanced. The audit was officially closed. I guided the vehicle through the grid of downtown streets, pointing the hood east. My destination was the Atlantic coast, a 2-hour drive meant for solitary decompression. I intended to spend the weekend listening to the ocean tide, far removed from the sterile environment of legal boardrooms and forensic spreadsheets. A block before the highway on-ramp, the traffic signal suspended over the intersection transitioned from amber to a solid, commanding red. I applied gentle pressure to the brake pedal, bringing the sedan to a smooth, controlled halt behind the thick white crosswalk line. The intersection was wide, flanked by towering glass office buildings and ground-floor retail storefronts. The ambient temperature was punishing. Heat radiated in visible, shimmering waves off the dark asphalt, distorting the shapes of the vehicles waiting in the opposing lanes. On the right side corner of the intersection sat a municipal transit shelter. It belonged to the Lynx Public Transportation Network, designated by a faded blue and pink logo plastered on the side of the structure. The shelter consisted of a narrow aluminum bench and a curved plastic canopy that offered meager, ineffective protection against the harsh ultraviolet rays. A small group of commuters stood in the sliver of shade waiting for the outbound route to arrive. My gaze drifted over the waiting passengers, analyzing the scene with idle curiosity, while the traffic signal cycled through its programmed sequence. One figure stood slightly apart from the rest of the group. He leaned heavily against the metal pole supporting the printed bus schedule. The posture was instantly recognizable. It was the same slumping, defeated angle I had observed just an hour ago outside the municipal clerk office. It was Jason. The poetic justice of the tableau required no verbal acknowledgement. His commercial real estate credentials were suspended pending a formal criminal hearing. His hidden offshore accounts were legally seized and transferred to my name. His business ledgers remained frozen under a federal suspicious activity report. He could not secure a loan, lease a new vehicle, or hail a premium private car service. The man who scoffed at operational logistics, who treated a state-registered asset like a disposable poker chip, was now subjected to the rigid, unforgiving timetable of municipal transit. He wore the same rumpled beige dress shirt he had worn into the courthouse. Dark, spreading patches of perspiration bloomed under his arms and trailed down his spine. The Florida humidity was relentless, pressing against him like a physical weight. He shifted his stance, the deeply scuffed leather Oxford shoes scraping against the concrete sidewalk. He looked hollowed out, aged by the cascading consequences of a single, arrogant decision. He stared down at the pavement, a man anchored to the wreckage of his own terrible choices. The heavy diesel engine of a commercial delivery truck idled loudly in the adjacent lane, emitting a harsh mechanical rattle. The noise drew his attention. Jason turned his head toward the street, his gaze sweeping across the rows of stopped traffic. His eyes tracked over the various cars before locking onto the dark slate sedan waiting at the red light. Recognition dawned on his exhausted features. He identified the familiar silhouette of the vehicle he had attempted to launder for untraceable cash just weeks prior. He squinted through the harsh glare of the sun, his eyes meeting mine through the passenger side window. He realized exactly who was sitting behind the steering wheel. A narcissist always anticipates an emotional exchange, even a hostile one. He expects a reaction. He waited for me to lower the glass and deliver a final cutting remark. He braced for a blaring horn, a gloating smile, or a crude gesture. He craved any signal indicating he still occupied a meaningful space in my mind. He needed validation that his existence still provoked a response. I provided nothing. My expression remained a flat, unreadable surface. I did not glare. I did not smirk. I extended my index finger and pressed the electronic window control on the door panel. The tinted glass glided upward with a smooth, mechanized hum. The dark barrier sealed into place, sliding into the rubber weather stripping with a definitive click. The act shut out the stifling heat, the urban noise, and his entire existence. The traffic signal suspended above the intersection shifted to a brilliant, illuminating green. I released the brake pedal and pressed the accelerator. The sedan surged forward, crossing the intersection with effortless, calibrated power. I left him standing on the corner, waiting for a public bus he once mocked, inhaling the exhaust of the vehicle he tried to steal. The highway on-ramp curved ahead, presenting an open stretch of dark pavement leading away from the city center. I merged into the fast lane, the digital speedometer climbing steadily as the urban skyline shrank in the rearview mirror. The coastal shoreline awaited, offering miles of uninterrupted horizon and the rhythmic cleansing sound of the tide. This narrative is no longer about betrayal. It is a testament to the quiet, devastating power of documentation. True leverage is not found in screaming matches on suburban lawns or desperate pleas for validation in front of a fractured family. Leverage is found in timestamps, audit trails, and the patient, unyielding execution of boundaries. When an adversary attempts to rewrite the rules of a partnership, you do not argue with their fiction. You present the raw data to the authorities and allow the system to operate exactly as designed. Some endings aren't loud. They are deliberate. If someone tells you to take the bus, make sure you check their paperwork first. If this story made you rethink how you handle conflict, or if you have ever used cold, hard facts to defeat an arrogant illusion, drop a comment below and share your experience. Hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for the next audit. You never know when the truth will demand a reckoning. When I drove away from the downtown intersection, leaving my ex-husband standing at that municipal transit shelter, I did not feel the fiery surge of victory. As the sweltering Florida heat remained sealed outside the cool, sanitized cabin of my recovered sedan, my mind drifted away from the logistics of the divorce. I found myself thinking not about the man shrinking in my rearview mirror, but about the boy he must have once been. I thought about the children sleeping in bedrooms all across our sprawling American suburbs, and the terrifyingly fragile process of shaping their moral architecture. The total collapse of Jason's life, his suspended brokerage license, his frozen bank accounts, his seized corporate assets, and his public humiliation was not an accident of fate. It was the mathematical culmination of a lifetime spent believing that actions could be erased with a charming smile. When we look at the wreckage of a life built on deceit, we must ask ourselves a deeply uncomfortable question as parents and mentors. What are we truly modeling for the next generation? Are we raising children to value deep, uncompromising honesty and fairness? Or are we merely training them to be exceptional actors on a suburban stage? In traditional American culture, we are intensely obsessed with the aesthetic of the perfect family. We prize the manicured lawns of upscale subdivisions, the flawless holiday greeting cards, and the powerful illusion of unwavering domestic bliss. From a young age, we subtly instruct our children to smile for the camera, to project an aura of effortless success, and to prioritize the facade of a good life over the concrete foundation of a deeply honest one. Jason was a direct product of this cultural blind spot. He was raised in an environment that taught him that as long as the external image was maintained, the luxury vehicles, the expensive dinners, the prestigious title of consultant, the internal moral rot simply did not matter. He truly believed he could steal my state-registered asset, forge a corporate seal, and fraudulently mortgage his own sister's home, all while maintaining the veneer of a respectable, traditional family provider. The tragic involvement of Jason's sister Laura offers a profound lesson in the dangers of misguided family responsibility. For decades, Laura operated under the conventional, deeply ingrained belief that family means everything, a phrase which in our culture too often translates to family must be forgiven for everything. Whenever Jason failed, she was his eternal safety net. She smoothed his rough edges, excused his financial impulsivity, and offered him endless unearned chances, believing that her unconditional support was an act of profound familial love. But true parenting and true long-term guidance is not about shielding a child from the consequences of their actions. It is about allowing gravity to do its job. By catching him every single time he fell, the people who raised Jason never allowed him to feel the bruising educational impact of reality. They raised a man who viewed his loved ones not as autonomous human beings deserving of fairness, but as emotional and financial lines of credit waiting to be drawn upon. If we genuinely want to raise resilient, ethical children within a traditional structure, we must love them enough to let them fail. We must teach them that true accountability isn't just about saying you are sorry. It is about paying the debt. We must also radically redefine how we teach children to process and express their emotions in the face of betrayal. From a very young age, we socialize children, especially young girls, to believe that loud, performative, emotional expression is the only valid response to a broken heart. We expect tears. We expect dramatic screaming matches on front lawns. We expect the chaotic, theatrical heartbreak that my husband and his mistress so desperately craved from me when she parked my stolen sedan in my driveway. We teach our youth that if they do not bleed publicly, they must not care deeply. But deep emotional awareness does not mean surrendering to every chaotic feeling that washes over you. It means possessing the self-respect to sit in absolute silence, examine the facts, and audit the situation. I want to teach the next generation that true power is not loud. It is precise and deliberate. When someone violates your consent, steals your property, or lies to your face, you do not owe them a performance of your pain. You owe them the cold, mechanical reality of a boundary. We must teach our children that their dignity is an impenetrable fortress, and no one, no matter how much they claim to love them, is automatically entitled to see them bleed. This brings me to a perspective that makes many traditionalists deeply uncomfortable. A viewpoint that fundamentally challenges the conventional wisdom of raising children within the family structure. Society demands that we teach children the absolute virtue of unconditional love. We are repeatedly told that family is an unbreakable bond, a sacred covenant that must weather any storm, no matter how severe the abuse or the deceit. I argue that we must teach our children the heresy of conditional access. Unconditional love is a beautiful, noble concept, but it must never, ever equate to unconditional access to your life, your assets, or your peace of mind. We are doing our children a grave generational disservice if we raise them to be endlessly forgiving martyrs for the sake of keeping the family together. We must empower them to look at someone they love deeply, a spouse, a sibling, or even a parent, and say, "I love you, but because you cannot be honest and fair, you are no longer allowed to stand in my space." Forgiveness is a personal, internal choice to let go of anger. But access is an exclusive privilege that must be actively earned and maintained through relentless honesty, mutual respect, and ethical behavior. The legacy we leave behind is not contained in hidden investment portfolios, commercial real estate ventures, or luxury vehicles. The true inheritance we pass to our children is the architecture of their own self-worth. It is the ability to recognize a lie, the courage to enforce a boundary, and the quiet, unshakable strength to sanitize a car, roll up a tinted window, and drive away from anyone who attempts to erase their autonomy. We are not just raising individuals. We are raising the future custodians of truth in a world that desperately prefers comfortable illusions. If this reflection resonates with you, if you believe in teaching the next generation the quiet, devastating power of facts over theatrics, I invite you to join our community. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on how we can better raise resilient, accountable children. And please follow Emily Told Stories. We share narratives that challenge the expected, offering a sanctuary for those who refuse to be rewritten by the narcissists of the world. We spend our entire lives trying to build homes for our children that can weather any storm, filling them with the warmth of unwavering forgiveness and the cultural promise of perpetual grace. But perhaps the most vital, life-saving door we can ever build for our children isn't the one that generously welcomes the world in. It is the one equipped with a heavy, unyielding deadbolt. Because the greatest, most profound act of parental love is not teaching a child how to endlessly endure the fire. It is teaching them that they were always allowed to walk out of the burning house and let it turn to ash. And as you look at the people sitting across your own dinner table tonight, ask yourself, are you building a foundation they can stand on? Or are you just polishing the lock on a cage they haven't yet realized they need to escape?